Chapter 474. Did you see it? I hit 7 10-point shots just now, 7. If it weren't for the bad recruitment system of the imperial court, I might have already become a sharpshooter in our army. After the group of people returned to the parking lot by car, they walked in the direction of the villa in a mighty manner, but when they left, they naturally bragged to each other. Okay, stop bragging, how many bullets did you shoot? I didn't look carefully, but you used at least 15 magazines. 15 magazines to hit 7 10-point shots, you don't feel embarrassed. I only used 10 magazines to hit 5 10-point shots, I'm much better than you. Hearing this person's words, a person next to him immediately said disdainfully. Phew, you really have the guts to say that. Weren't you able to defeat 10 of them because you were playing with the MG42 for an hour at the start and your hands were numb from the shock? I said that the things you chose were wrong. Look, when you chose them, the waiter in the shop opposite was scared silly. But unfortunately, before this person finished speaking, he was interrupted by another person. That person really didn't have a single bullet left. Alright, stop bragging. If it were up to me, none of you would be able to do it. We have to look at our director Lu's skills. After all, he used to be a soldier. That pistol, he shoots wherever he points. Pa, 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 pa. I have never seen Director Lu miss the target before. Looking at the lively few people here, at this time, there would always be a henchman standing up and flattering the leader. Sigh. Young people are really too eager for quick success and instant benefits. Shooting is like tasting wine, it can't be rushed. And the director surnamed Lu, after hearing someone mention him, couldn't help but give that person a look of appreciation. Then he talked about his past when he was a soldier and how to shoot. Obviously, these young people didn't want to listen to this, but they didn't dare to interrupt the leader's speech, so they could only listen there. At the same time, they were also ridiculing the henchmen in their hearts. They came out to play, but they didn't forget to teach them a lesson. Just as these people were about to walk to the villa, a car they were very familiar with slowly drove over from a distance. The tourists were all familiar with this car. It was War Shield, although they had only learned of this name the day before. But it didn't prevent them from recognizing this car logo, and they can brag about it when they go back in the future. After all, this car is worth 20 million yuan. Hey! Xiao Jiang is here. I haven't seen him all day. After seeing the car, Director Lu, who was talking, said to the people around him as if he was really familiar with Jiang Hai. Anyway, other people couldn't say anything about him. Yes, I haven't seen him for the whole day. As soon as they heard the director's words, someone naturally answered. However, as soon as his voice fell, he saw Jiang Hai's car had already stopped by the roadside in the distance. Jiang Hai waved at them and jumped out of the car. At the same time, he took out a large bag from the back seat. Hi, Xiao Jiang. I haven't seen you all day. What are you doing here? Seeing Jiang Hai walking over with a bag, Director Lu couldn't help but welcome him with a smile. His attitude towards Jiang Hai was very good now because he liked this place very much. Oh, Director Lu, I'm here to deliver some things. Hey, these are the things you want. Hearing this fat man's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Yesterday, Wu Shan had already introduced the important guests in this tour group to Jiang Hai. Among them was Director Lu. Jiang Hai opened a business here, so there was no need to make things difficult for him, so he called him. Jiang Hai also responded with a smile. As for whether he was willing to get close to him or not, he was not a woman, so Jiang Hai didn't care. Jiang Hai saw the 6 people from yesterday in the crowd, so he handed the bag over to them. Seeing the bag handed over by Jiang Hai, the 6 people were a little confused at first, but they instantly understood what was inside the bag. After taking the bag, they looked inside. Sure enough, a greenish-brown behemoth was lying in the bag at this time, looking at them with its fangs and claws. As soon as they saw their shocked eyes, many people nearby came over. Oh my God, is this a lobster? This is a lobster. At first glance, someone had already exclaimed. How is this a lobster? This is a lobster king. I once saw one in XX seafood restaurant. It seems to be about the same size as this one. It's the treasure of their restaurant. It only costs 100,000 yuan. Oh my god, you're rich. You can actually afford to eat this thing. When a person next to him saw this lobster, he couldn't help but be shocked and said slowly. Hearing his words, the others looked at this guy with a face of surprise. Even Director Liu couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. To be honest, after being the main cadre of a state-owned enterprise for so many years, when he was able to eat such a big lobster back then, he wasn't qualified to eat it. Now that he was qualified to eat it, but the imperial court didn't allow it. A lobster that cost 100,000 yuan, just thinking about it made him salivate. Hee hee, it's not that expensive. It's 18,000 yuan for one. This is produced in Zhanghai's manor. Yesterday, we heard from tour guide George that Zhanghai's manor has more than 20 kilograms of lobsters, but we can't afford to eat more than 20 kilograms, so the 6 of us combined, and each of us took $500 to buy this one. By the way, Zhanghai, how heavy is this lobster? Seeing everyone looking at them with envy and jealousy, the 6 people's vanity was greatly satisfied. However, the way Director Qi looked at them made them panic. It seemed that more people would have to eat this lobster tonight. This is 16 kilograms. The extra kilogram is my gift to you. In addition to the lobster, there are some sea cucumbers and abalones. They're all pretty good. You should have a kitchen in your villa, so you can make some simple dishes. If you want to make something fancy, go to the restaurant over there. Whether it's an Italian restaurant, a Boston restaurant, or a French restaurant, they all know how to make this thing. The processing fee should be less than $20. Jiang Hai smiled when he heard his words. He didn't care if these people could eat this thing or not. His main goal was to make money. When they heard Jiang Hai say that there were sea cucumbers and abalones inside, the 6 people looked at each other. One of them was stronger and directly lifted the lobster out. As soon as he lifted it out, he saw a lot of northern polar sea cucumbers and fist-sized abalones. What the F*** CK? Jiang Hai, you're too generous. You want 3 abalones? Looking at the abalones below, some people who knew their stuff had already cried out. Abalones had always been extremely precious in China. Now that they were in Shanghai, he was directly giving them away. They should all have 2 abalones. The ones with 3 abalones are still babies to me, so I don't usually fish them out. As for the sea cucumbers, they're all grown up. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also laughed. If he didn't pretend now, when would he? Oh my god, Jiang Hai, are you selling these abalones and sea cucumbers? Buying lobster was a little expensive. Although it was 4 to 5 times cheaper than in China, it wasn't something that ordinary people could afford. Not everyone was willing to spend $3,000 to eat a big lobster. However, according to Jiang Hai, abalones and sea cucumbers weren't anything rare here, so they shouldn't be too expensive. Looking at the eager gazes in front of him, Jiang Hai calculated and said to them, "Sea cucumbers, this kind of Arctic sea cucumber is fresh. I'll give you 1 kilogram. $100. For this kind of abalones, $150 per kilogram." The best quality sea cucumbers were naturally very expensive. Jiang Hai had the best quality sea cucumbers. If they were dried and brought back to China to sell, it wouldn't be excessive for Jiang Hai to sell them for $6,500 in a 300-gram gift box. However, since they were fresh here, according to the sun-dried rate of 3 kilograms to 1 kilogram, Jiang Hai could sell them for $100. After all, this was already 1,000 grams. He was selling them for 1 kilogram, not 1 kilogram. $100 was equivalent to $600. For such a big sea cucumber, $600 per kilogram was an insane profit. As for the abalones, the best 2-headed abalones in Africa, they were sold for $2,500 per kilogram. Of course, the so-called abalones were different from the ordinary ones. The so-called abalones were a few hundred grams per kilogram, which was more than 600 grams per kilogram. It was different from the ordinary ones, which were 500 grams per kilogram. However, even if they were sold for $4,000 per kilogram, Jiang Hai was selling them for $150 per kilogram, which was about $900 per kilogram. This was at least 4 times the price. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, these people were tempted. Looking at their expressions, Jiang Hai found some work for Ai Dehua and the others so that his fish farm could also generate some income. After all, the United States didn't eat sea cucumbers or abalones here. It was also very troublesome for Jiang Hai to sell these things in China. Not only do they need to be dried, but they also need to be responsible for the sales. And most importantly, Jiang Hai didn't deliberately raise these things. So the quantity was not very big. It was so big that he needed to find a place to sell them. Since the quantity was not very big, other than eating it himself, it was also a good choice to sell it to tourists. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, all these people were tempted. Looking at their expressions, Jiang Hai smiled. How to generate income from tourism? How much money can he earn from renting houses? Of course, he had to rely on selling things. However, some places sold fake goods or expensive goods. Winthrop wouldn't do that. But they felt that it was very suitable for Jiang Hai to sell to tourists. Indeed, if you travel all over the country, even the coastal areas, it would not be cheaper than Jiang Hai's place. For foodies, Jiang Hai's place was the real heaven. It was a paradise on earth. Well, a few of us are here to buy a lobster. Can you deliver it to us tomorrow? Finally, after these people discussed for a long time, there was the first group of people who wanted to eat the lobster. These people were not like the 6 people who wanted to eat the lobster alone. This time, there were 10 of them. $3,000, $300 per person. That's $1,800. It was very suitable to eat such a big lobster. No problem. I'll sell it to you for $3,000 too. Hearing this person's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. This was all real money, and there was no tax on it. Then I'll buy 1 kilogram of abalone. I'll buy 2 kilograms of sea cucumber. We'll buy 2 lobsters. Can you give us some abalone and sea cucumber? Since the first person wanted the lobster, the rest of the people didn't hesitate. They immediately rushed up and started to buy. Chapter 475. Jiang, you called me. Looking at Jiang Hai, who was sitting in the living room and watching TV, Edward Anderson walked in. To be honest, he was under a lot of pressure now. Of course, this pressure was not given to him by Jiang Hai, nor was it given to him by his subordinates. It was given to him by himself. No matter what kind of force it was, as long as it was divided into 2 parts, the battle between the sea and the land would always be staged. It was the same for Jiang Hai. Usually, if one side needed help, everyone would go and help. However, cowboys and sailors would always unconsciously start to compare themselves with each other. Salary was another matter. Because Jiang Hai's salary was quite high, at least much higher than that of ordinary sailors and cowboys. It was a competition of rewards, or a question of which side was more profitable. Logically speaking, the sea was definitely more profitable than the land, because the area of the sea was larger. Of course, this was referring to Jiang Hai's manor. The area of the sea field was more than 10 times the area of the land, so it could not be said that the money earned was 10 times more than the land. But it was at least 2 or 3 times more than the land. Originally, Edward Anderson did not care too much about this. Because he knew that no matter what he raised, as long as he raised it, it should be more profitable than raising cattle. For example, raising codfish in such a large sea field would not be enough to feed 10 million codfish. A pound of codfish was 80 cents, and 1 codfish was 2 pounds. 10 million codfish would be 20 million pounds, which would be $16 million a year. After deducting the cost of labor and feed, it would be $12 million. After paying taxes, at least there would be a pure profit of about $7 million. How many cows could one raise in an ordinary manner to earn $7 million? When you buy a cow, it costs $4,000, and when you sell it, it costs 5,000. After deducting the cost of labor, feed, and transfer, you can earn about $100 per cow. 10,000 cows would be 1 million, and 70,000 cows would be 7 million. Could Jiang Hai's manor raise 70,000 cows? Therefore, according to common sense, fishing was definitely more profitable than doing it on land. But who knew that Jiang Hai was so awesome? 20,000 fish were worth 3 billion. This time, all the pressure was on Edward Anderson. He was afraid that Jiang Hai would stop raising fish after seeing the profits on land. Fortunately, Jiang Hai did not seem to have that intention. This time, he had specially imported a type of rockfish from China called the big yellow rockfish. In his opinion, this type of fish was no different from the American red rockfish. It tasted similar, but for some reason, this type of fish could be sold for $200 per kilogram in Wuxia. He could only say that the Wuxia people were too rich. $200 for this? After eating it, one could ascend to immortality. But no matter what, he was still doing his best. He was also enduring it now. When this batch of fish came out, he wouldn't be able to endure it anymore. But now that he looked at Jiang Hai, he still felt a little guilty. Hey, Uncle Edward, come, this is the order. Catch them for me before 3:00 tomorrow afternoon. Seeing Edward Anderson coming over, Jiang Hai pulled him to the sofa, and then took out a handwritten order. You have an order? Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, Uncle Edward couldn't help but be stunned. Although it's a good thing to have orders, the fish in the fishery haven't grown up yet. Why would he take orders now? Is he going to sell fry? But when he saw the things on it, he couldn't help but frown, because what was written on it had nothing to do with fish. For lobsters more than 15 kilograms, 17 kilograms of abalones, 20 kilograms of sea cucumbers. Jiang, what do you want so many of these things for? Looking at these things in front of him, Edward Anderson couldn't help but ask with some doubts. These are for sale. Don't you know that there is a tour group in town? These are all ordered by them. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. These were all ordered by his gods of fortune. Naturally, he would do his best to fulfill them. Oh, so that's the case, but they didn't order a lot. How much can they sell for? Looking at Jiang Hai, Edward Anderson scratched his head. He really didn't see how valuable these things were. How much can they sell for? Hee, just these 4 lobsters, I sold them for $12,000, these 17 kilograms of abalones, $2,550, and these 20 kilograms of sea cucumbers, $2,000. Jiang Hai pointed at the things on the list and said with a smile. What? These things are so expensive? Normally, Americans didn't eat sea cucumbers and abalones. Now that he heard that Jiang Hai was about to sell them for $5,000, and it was only a small amount, De Hua was a little shocked. As for the price of lobsters, he was too lazy to complain. Lobsters above 15 kilograms are really rare here. However, it's not that no one has ever caught such a big lobster. Generally speaking, lobsters of this size are sold to fishermen for about $1,000. This time, Jiang Hai directly doubled the price and sold them. It's really shocking. That's because he didn't know that Jiang Hai doubled the price, which is 4 times cheaper than in China, so he couldn't help but be tempted. This is just the first batch. As long as we sell our lobsters, abalones, and sea cucumbers, I believe that there will be more and more domestic tour groups in the future. Now there are only 47 people. If there are 470 people, 4,700 people, or even 47,000 people, the price will increase by 100 times. Looking at Edward Anderson, Jiang Hai said with a smile. He is now very confident. Winthrop is not bad, although not as good as his manor, but compared to the general vacation, Winthrop is really good, and the most important thing is that the cost is very low. He believes that after these people return to China, they will definitely go to their relatives and friends to promote this place. At that time, if those people also come, it is impossible for this town not to become popular. This so-called popular certainly doesn't refer to places like Las Vegas, but if the annual traffic can reach 100,000 people, Jiang Hai believes that it is enough for the people in the town and him to make a lot of money. I understand. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson couldn't help but nod. It seems that Jiang Hai is still thinking far ahead. When Jiang Hai went to deliver the things the next day, to his surprise, he received another batch of orders. It seems that the people who come to China to play are really not short of money. At the same time, he also found that many old cadres have already gone to the river and the beach to fish the next day. Originally, the idea of using fishing to attract tourists was also proposed by Jiang Hai. Originally, when no one went on the first day, Jiang Hai was a little nervous. But now it seems that he was overthinking. The middle-aged people in China like to fish a lot. However, there is no sense of accomplishment in fishing for fish in the pond, and it is difficult to catch wild fish. How can it be like Winthrop? Wild fish are especially easy to catch. Most importantly, these fish are not ordinary fish, they are all big fish. Even Director Liu, who talked to Jiang Hai yesterday, caught a big carp that is more than 15 kilograms. Just like that, the days passed as these people had fun. Smiles gradually appeared on the faces of the people in the small town. Just like what Jiang Hai said, these 47 people are not important. What is important is the feedback of these 47 people and the market behind them. Moreover, even if the market behind them is not taken into account, the purchase rate of these 47 people is already very shocking to the town. On the first day, they spent more than $1,000 at the horse farm, which made old George very happy. This is not counting the people who came one after another in the next few days. In the end, old George's horse farm made a total of $2,170 in the past 5 days. All he paid was some time and some horses to carry these people around the pasture. That's all. It could be said that he made more than $2,000 from pure profit. Apart from the horse farm, the shooting range is the second place where he makes the most money. In 5 days, he made a total of $7,235. After deducting the original cost and including taxes, he made more than $3,000 in pure profit. Of this, Jiang Hai still has to share more than $1,000. Don't forget that he is the one who invested the money. The third place to make money was the commercial street. Of course, this does not refer to the entire commercial street. If the commercial street made all the money, it would be much more than the horse farm and the shooting range. After 4 days of fun, on the 5th day, the tourists consciously went to buy souvenirs on their own. However, when they saw the American ginseng that was more than 10 years old and the pure maple syrup that was only a few dollars, the souvenirs that were handmade were only a few dollars, and the ginseng that was more than 10 years old only cost a few $100s. When the clothes and food made in the United States were very cheap, a buying frenzy broke out among the tourists. In one day, the commercial street made more than $40,000. After deducting labor, water, electricity, and the original purchase price, each shop made more than $1,000. Some of the townsfolk who originally did not trust Wuxia tourism cheered at this moment. As for the townsfolk who did not join in, they were pounding their feet and stomping their feet. After all, they had lost a chance to make money. Fortunately, it was not too late. Immediately, many people racked their brains to see what the town still lacked. Then they found a business opportunity, that is, there are no hotels in the town. It is understandable, originally, there were no outsiders in the town, so there was only a very shabby small hotel. But now, in the town, except for Jiang Hai's villa area, there are not many hotels to stay in, so these townspeople's homes became the only choice. But even if they remembered, it was too late for the first batch. They would have to wait for the second batch. No one thought that the second batch of construction would come so soon after the first Winthrop construction. But at this moment, Jiang Hai had nothing to do with this, because he was already preparing to upgrade before these people left. Chapter 476. Goodbye. Goodbye, I'll be back. Standing in front of the bus, Director Liu waved his hand vigorously. Hearing his words, Director Liu was very excited. He didn't know if Delia and Mayor Wallace, who came to send them off, understood or not. After greeting each other for a long time, everyone got on the bus and left Winthrop. What, you still don't want to leave? Back in the bus, as soon as Director Chi sat down, the person sitting next to him smiled and said. Hearing this person's words, Director Lu sighed. We've gone out to have fun so many times. Every time, we were as tired as a dead dog. In the end, we just took some photos. When we were about to leave, we didn't feel any nostalgia. But this time, I really liked it here. The pace of life here is slow and there are many things to play with. The things are good. Sigh, to be honest, I really don't want to leave. Hearing his companion's words, Director Lu sighed. Suddenly, he felt that coming here to play this time was really the right choice. If you don't want to leave, you can come back next time. Hearing his old companion's words, the person here also laughed and said. I really want to come back. Do you think we can move here after we retire? Looking back at the town that was getting farther and farther away, Director Lu suddenly said to the person next to him. If this is a small town in the country, then it doesn't matter if we come here, but the problem is that this is a foreign country, so this is destined to be impossible. Hearing his companion's words, Director Lu couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, then he laughed. He knew that his companion was right. This is the United States. It's not a place where you can settle down after you retire. If you want to settle down in the United States, you must get a green card. You can choose not to become a citizen of the United States, like Jiang Hai, but a green card is necessary. There are only 3 possibilities for long-term residence in the United States. One is a work visa, but this requires a visa and taxes. They are retired, so it is impossible for them to pay taxes in the United States. The second method is technical immigration. If there are some technologies that the U.S. needs, they will be given certain technological benefits and undergo technical immigration. However, the requirements for skilled immigrants in China were very strict. Generally speaking, those who wanted skilled immigrants would go straight to university in the United States. After graduating from university, they would find a job here and apply for a work visa. Then, when they had a certain level of ability, they would go through skilled immigrants and directly move over from China. It was very rare for China to let people go, and Director Lu and the rest did not have a chance. The third option was to invest in immigrants. This was the simplest option, but there was a problem. If they wanted to invest in immigrants, the imperial court would ask, where did the money come from? Based on wages alone, even if it was a state-owned enterprise, it wouldn't make much money. Although it could guarantee their daily lives, it wasn't easy to explain the millions of dollars that they had invested in immigration. It couldn't be like what some official had said, that his bank account had an extra 10 million yuan, and that he had earned the money by driving illegal cars at night. Anyone with a normal brain wouldn't believe such a statement. Not only would the immigration not be successful, but they would also be trapped by the imperial court. Director Lu wasn't stupid. He was just sighing with emotion, but when he heard his old friend's cold words, he had already thought it through. It seemed that he could only come here occasionally in the future. Fortunately, it wasn't expensive to come here. There were a lot of people who had the same idea. Since they got on the bus, everyone obviously hadn't calmed down from the excitement. Everyone was looking at their phones, looking at the photos inside. There were photos of fishing, river fishing, shooting, riding, shopping, and some romantic buildings. There were also photos of 2 museums, photos of singing hymns in teaching classes, photos of parties, and so on. Everyone had to admit that this trip brought them a lot of surprises. They were pleasantly surprised when it came to food. Whether it was the food in Jiang Hai's manor or the town's original food, they were all very difficult to eat in the country. At least with their average salary, they would go bankrupt if they ate such food in the country. They were even more surprised when it came to entertainment. The town didn't look big. It only took a little more than 3 hours to walk around the whole town, but there were a lot of things to play in this town. Whether it was the sea or the land, they were all very interesting. They were even happier when it came to clothing. On Winthrop's commercial street, other than the 2 museums, everything else was selling things, except for the biggest one, which was the town hall and the Iroquois Indian shop. There were also restaurants and shops selling clothes. Of course, the clothes sold were not like the ones on Fifth Avenue, which were all from big international brands. Instead, they sold civilian clothes in the United States, such as AF, which was the favorite of American high school and college students. In addition, there was also a sub-brand of AF called Hollister, which was also called Seagull in the country. There were also many other brands. Of course, these brands were very cheap, and tourists from the country bought a lot of them. It really wasn't that expensive. A pair of trousers cost more than $20, which was about 100 yuan in RMB. However, the quality was much better than the ones in China. If it was bought on behalf of a domestic buyer, it would cost at least 300 or 500 yuan. Therefore, the young people bought a lot of clothes here. There were also sports brands that were more common in the country. For example, tan shells were also sold here, but the price was much cheaper. Some shoes that were not popular, such as Nike's James Series shoes, were sold for more than 1,000 yuan in the country and $150 here. It was 1/3 cheaper than in the country. Last year's model was sold for less than $100 here. If it was the year before or some classic models, it would be even cheaper. Clothes and the like were also much cheaper than in China. Therefore, anyone who came here to play, whether it was eating, living, playing, or shopping, they were all quite satisfied. Everyone came here with only one suitcase, but when they left, they took more than 2 suitcases. This was especially true for the women. They were extremely attracted to American makeup products and the like. On the other hand, the mobile phones that Jiang Hai thought might be the most popular were not sold here. Take the Apple mobile phone for example. Although the price in the United States was much cheaper than in China, almost half of the price, and most importantly, it was better than the ones in China. However, there was a big problem that caused these people to not buy a mobile phone back home. It wasn't because of limited purchases, but because the mobile phones bought in the United States couldn't be accessed in China. Not every place had Wi-Fi. It was inconvenient for a mobile phone to not be able to access the internet. These people were not short of money. Spending more than 6,000 yuan on an Apple mobile phone was only half a month's salary. It was not that they could not afford it. Therefore, the mobile phone store that Jiang Hai had high hopes for only sold one mobile phone this time. It was bought for the family who came here to play. For them, it was enough to make calls and connect to Wi-Fi. Well, everyone, our trip to the small town of Winthrop in the United States has come to an end. Now, we will return to New York and board the plane at Guarati Airport in New York. We will return to the Imperial Capital Airport to end this trip. I don't know if everyone is satisfied with the town this time. Clapping his hands, Wuxian, who was standing at the very front, pulled everyone back from the feeling of reluctance and asked loudly. Hearing his words, everyone instantly burst into an uproar. Yes, I'm very satisfied. Director Wu, may I know how often the tour groups will be sent here? Someone asked immediately. We are actually just experimenting this time. After confirming that this place is very good, we should release 1 or 2 or even 3 times a month. If you like it here, please help us promote it when we go back. Looking at the excited crowd in front of him, Wuxian also said with a smile. To be honest, this place was really fun. Even if he has traveled extensively for so many years, he has nothing to say about this place. We will definitely come back. Hearing Wuxian say so, Director Lu in the front couldn't help but say with a smile. Since there is no way to settle here, it seems to be a good choice to always come here. Hearing Director Lu's words, all the people in the car laughed. However, a seed of hope had already sprouted in their hearts. Winthrop, the paradise in their eyes, was a paradise. They would definitely come back in the future. By the way, when we left, I didn't see Jiang Hai. At this moment, a young man suddenly said. They have some understanding of Jiang Hai these days. After all, they bought a lot of seafood from Jiang Hai. And Jiang Hai is also very generous. Not only does he often give them some weight, but he also gives them things. Lobsters, abalones, sea cucumbers, these things can't be eaten every day, but sometimes Jiang Hai gives them Arctic shrimp and crabs. They are very satisfied. The taste is quite good, much better than what they can buy in China. Now when they mention Jiang Hai, these people feel that their saliva secretion in their mouths is accelerated. He really has too much delicious food. I didn't see him yesterday. I heard from the big man who sent us that Jiang Hai seems to have gone out yesterday and will not be back for a while. Hearing this person's words, a person who is closer to Jiang Hai next to him also said with a smile. Hearing his words, at this time, other people also began to talk, but they are not concerned about what Jiang Hai is going to do, but Jiang Hai's seafood is really delicious. Unfortunately, even if it is 5 or 6 times cheaper than in China, they still can't afford it. After all, those seafood are not something that ordinary people can afford. Chapter 477. At this time, Jiang Hai naturally didn't know how high these tourists thought of him. He also didn't know how famous Winthrop was because of these people's WeChat moments. When these people returned to China, the things they brought back naturally caused an uproar. As a result, they had no choice but to send out the second tour group in just a week, even though they had originally planned to send out the second tour group in half a month. Moreover, the second tour group had more than 80 people, which was almost twice the number of people from the previous tour group. At the same time, when the second tour group came, the third tour group was also in preparation. Unknowingly, Winthrop became popular. It was somewhat inexplicably popular, but it was indeed popular. This also led to the sales of Jiang Hai's seafood. After all, for the Chinese, whether it was lobsters, abalones, or sea cucumbers, these were all good things. Among the people who came here to play, many of them were actually aiming for these things. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't know this at this time. When he found out in the future, he would just smile. In his opinion, these seafood sold to domestic tour groups were actually just small things. The real money came from quantity. At this time, he was now in a presidential suite in New York, looking at the scales on his body, ready to fall asleep at any time. Yes, Jiang Hai's scales were finally full, but considering that the first time he had the Dragon Ball, he fainted for a day. The second time when the python evolved into a flood dragon, he fainted for 3 days. This time, Jiang Hai really didn't know if he would faint or not. If he did, how many days would he be in a coma? According to this calculation, if he fainted, he might be in a coma for about a week or even 10 days. Therefore, he couldn't upgrade at home because no matter how much he stayed at home, not showing up for such a long time would arouse suspicion. If there were only Delina and Marion at home at this time, then he didn't care, but there were Bernice, Lilia, and Azalina, so he needed to think about it. After thinking about it again and again, Jiang Hai decided to come out and upgrade. When there were still a dozen scales left, Jiang Hai came out of home and drove directly to New York. He directly rented a presidential suite in a 5-star hotel and told the waiter that he didn't need to come in and clean it. He also ordered a lot of food and told the person in charge here that he was a writer and was working on his ideas, so if he didn't go out, no one was allowed to disturb him. He also paid a 1-month rent deposit in one go. The people in the hotel didn't care about Jiang Hai's words. People like Jiang Hai didn't exist before. If Jiang Hai died in the room, they could just leave him for a month. It wasn't like he didn't pay Jiang Hai. In fact, inside the hotel, there were some troubles. Jiang Hai was afraid that while he was leveling up, someone would suddenly barge in. That would be troublesome. However, he was also afraid of the dangers of going to small places. So, he decided to just dive into the sea to level up. But what if his ability to be unafraid of water disappeared when he leveled up? What if he encountered a sea monster? Therefore, Jiang Hai had a lot of things to think about. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai decided that it would be better to stay in such a big hotel. However, after arriving in New York, Jiang Hai's leveling speed suddenly slowed down a lot. In his manner, he could gain more than 20 scales a day. But here, he could only gain 5 or 6 scales a day. Fortunately, Jiang Hai didn't have too many left, only a dozen scales were left. After coming here for a day, his scales had already increased by 2/5. At the end of the second day, there were only 3 scales left. So much so that on this day, Jiang Hai didn't dare to wear clothes and kept paying attention to these 3 scales. When there was only 1 scale left, Jiang Hai looked at the mirror one last time. After going to the bathroom, he took a deep breath and returned to the hotel's big bed. He just watched the TV in front of him and prepared for the last time. Finally, the 3rd scale slowly grew out. The moment the scale was completely filled, Lin Fan's eyes lit up. Jiang Hai's mind suddenly went blank. Jiang Hai said in his heart. Sure enough, he fell into a coma again. In Jiang Hai's mind, he once again saw the scene of the last leveling up. Dark clouds covered the sky and the sea wind howled. The world was in chaos, and in this scene, there was a giant golden flood dragon. At this time, it was attacking the waves and the dark clouds in the sky. From time to time, the dragon's roar made the whole world tremble. Jiang Hai knew that the flood dragon was the one on his body. However, he didn't know what these dark clouds and waves represented. In his eyes, this giant flood dragon was overturning the rivers and seas. It seemed to be constantly anxious because of something. At the same time, it was also accumulating energy. The whole space seemed to be about to be shattered by this flood dragon. The whole world was about to be turned upside down. Heaven and earth are heartless and treat all things as straw dogs. Suddenly, another voice was heard. It floated over from the distant horizon. Before Jiang Hai could react, a purple lightning suddenly fell from the sky. After seeing this lightning, the giant golden flood dragon didn't shrink back. Instead, it rushed towards the lightning. Crack! A loud sound was heard as the giant golden flood dragon collided with the lightning and turned it into a purple electric arc that dissipated between heaven and earth. The golden flood dragon's body couldn't help but dim a little. Is this a tribulation? Although Jiang Hai didn't have much knowledge, he had read a lot of novels in the past. Naturally, he had also read the most popular cultivation novels. When he saw this scene, these 2 words immediately popped up in his mind. As if responding to Jiang Hai's inner thoughts, a second purple lightning struck down instantly. The giant flood dragon coiled its body in the air and once again took the initiative to meet it. Then, another crack was heard. The lightning was broken, but the giant flood dragon was still holding its head high. The dragon's roar reverberated throughout the entire space. Then, under Jiang Hai's gaze, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 10th, 20th, and 30th rays appeared. Streaks of lightning kept falling and striking the giant golden flood dragon's body. In the beginning, the giant flood dragon was still standing upright. However, after the 30th strike, the golden light on the giant flood dragon's body had completely disappeared. However, the giant flood dragon was still unmoved. It continued to clash with the lightning, using its tyrannical body to resist the might of the lightning. At first, the giant flood dragon's body was left with many wounds, but it didn't show any signs of fatigue. After the 42nd strike, the giant flood dragon knocked away the lightning for the first time. However, it was also thrown away like a sack hit by a truck. Jiang Hai's heart couldn't help but tighten as he watched the giant flood dragon fly away. He knew that he was the flood dragon, and what the flood dragon was doing now was to level up. He didn't know if he would level up if the flood dragon failed, but he couldn't do anything now. He had no other choice but to watch from here. Fortunately, the flood dragon didn't seem to be an ordinary cannon. Although it was blasted away, it didn't fly far. Before it fell into the sea, it raised its head again. It ignored the blood that was spurting from its wounds and opened its mouth to roar loudly. Hearing its roar, the sky seemed to be angered by it. Another lightning bolt fell from the sky. This time, the lightning bolt was twice as thick as the previous one. However, the giant flood dragon didn't retreat because of this. It still danced its body and forced its way forward. With another bang, the giant flood dragon was directly hit into the sea, and the lightning bolt was officially broken. However, it was only for a moment in the sea. The giant flood dragon rose into the air again. Jiang Hai saw the giant flood dragon begin to breathe heavily for the first time. It was tired. Jiang Hai knew that it was really tired, but it couldn't retreat because this was a tribulation. At this time, the 44th bolt of lightning struck down. The giant flood dragon once again met it head-on. This time, it was even more miserable. Jiang Hai could almost see that this bolt of lightning not only smashed it into the deep sea, but also charred a large part of its dragon whiskers. However, after the giant flood dragon slowed down in the water, it once again rose up to meet the 45th bolt of lightning. The 45th lightning bolt was twice as thick as the 44th lightning bolt. This time, the giant flood dragon not only paid the price of the dragon's whiskers on its face, but this lightning bolt also left a huge scar on its face. However, the giant flood dragon didn't lose. When the 46th lightning bolt struck, the giant flood dragon even broke a dragon horn in order to deal with this lightning bolt. When the 47th lightning bolt struck, the giant flood dragon paid the price of another dragon's leg and blinded one of its eyes. When the 48th lightning bolt struck, the giant flood dragon no longer used its head to hit the lightning bolt. Instead, it used its tail to resist it. After this lightning bolt, the giant flood dragon's tail was instantly blown to pieces. 1/3 of the giant flood dragon's body had disappeared. Only the remaining 2/3 were still stubbornly staring at the heavens with their remaining eyes. Perhaps the heavens were also watching this flood dragon. After hesitating for a long time, the thickness of the dark clouds increased in an instant. The heavens seemed to be angered by this giant flood dragon that was about to transcend its tribulation. As purple lightning arcs continued to gather in the dark clouds, the giant flood dragon also uneasily circled under the clouds. However, it didn't have any intention of dodging. One of its eyes stared fiercely at the dark clouds in the sky. Finally, after an unknown amount of time, a purple beam of light. Yes, this was no longer lightning, but a real purple beam of light. It fell from the sky and heavily blasted the giant flood dragon's body. The scales on the giant flood dragon's body were blown away the moment they came into contact with the lightning. The flesh and blood without the protection of the scales also turned into countless fragments at this time. Under the scouring of the lightning, the giant flood dragon's skin was gone, its scales were gone, and its flesh was gone. Almost all that was left was its skeleton, but in this skeleton, the white dragon pearl was shining with a different brilliance. Chapter 478. Finally, the purple beam of light disappeared, and the giant flood dragon had almost become a crippled flood dragon. Apart from the dragon pearl that was still shining brightly, only a skeleton was left of the giant flood dragon. Jiang Hai felt as if his heart was about to jump out of his chest when he saw the scene in front of him. The thumping sound kept echoing in his ears. Jiang Hai didn't know what to say as he looked at the situation in front of him. Heaven and earth are heartless and treat all living things like straw dogs. Saints are heartless and treat the common people like straw dogs. Between heaven and earth, there is no one else. Weak but unyielding, move and recover. Words are useless, so it's better to guard the center. At this moment, the floating voice was heard again. Then, the dark clouds suddenly dispersed, and a golden light shone on the giant flood dragon, which was only left with a skeleton. The moment it came into contact with the golden light, the giant flood dragon, which was only left with a skeleton, actually started to grow flesh, scales, and horns quickly. What caught Jiang Hai's attention the most was that the spiral dragon horns of the flood dragon had finally turned into antlers. Although there were only 2 forks, this meant that the flood dragon had succeeded. It was no longer a flood dragon, but a dragon. Jiang Hai's consciousness also entered the body of the giant dragon at this moment. When he opened his eyes and looked at the calm sea surface, a voice in Jiang Hai's ear said, "Dragon." Yes, Jiang Hai's level had now risen to that of a dragon. He didn't know if there were any levels after a dragon, but he felt that a dragon needed a stronger body. In addition to his body, it seemed like he had another ability. "Miss Walton, you're making things difficult for us." In the corridor of the hotel, the manager of the service department looked at the group of people in front of him with a conflicted expression and said with a long face, "Difficult my ass. I know him. I'm going to find him and catch him in the act. Get out of my way." If anything happens, I'll take responsibility. Hearing the manager's words, the woman walking in front of him said unhappily and pushed him away. Yes, the person in the corridor was none other than Prawalton. Prawalton hadn't seen Jiang Hai for almost 2 months since Jiang Hai left. It wasn't that she didn't want to see Jiang Hai, but that Jiang Hai didn't want to see her. After all, it was a little awkward the last time they met. Jiang Hai did not have many thoughts about Selena Gomez, but Prawalton had a lot of thoughts about her. Therefore, ever since Selena Gomez and Jiang Hai had the wrong night, Prawalton had been trying to get back at Jiang Hai. Of course, it wasn't to stop Jiang Hai in business. Jiang Hai's beef was a seller's market. He could sell it to whoever he wanted, and he didn't have to worry about sales. Therefore, Prawalton's idea was to stop Jiang Hai in the relationship. Her idea was very simple, and that was to let her people seduce Jiang Hai. As long as the two of them had sex, she would take a photo and show it to Selena Gomez. She would tell her that Jiang Hai was a scumbag and that men were unreliable. It was better for them to be together. However, Jiang Hai didn't know whether it was to avoid awkwardness or to directly see through her trick. Therefore, since then, she didn't see Jiang Hai. Even if she went to Jiang Hai's manor to pull the cattle, the person in charge was Robbins Garcia. Later, when she heard that Jiang Hai was attacked, she took the initiative to call him, but Jiang Hai didn't let her come. Because a few days later, Jiang Hai went to Wuxia. When he came back from Wuxia, she went to pull the cattle again, but she didn't see Jiang Hai. This made her teeth itch. This was the last time she came to pull the cattle. Yes, Jiang Hai had sold all the cattle that he sold to her. Now, in Jiang Hai's manor, there were only some cows, some calves, and a few bulls that were used as breeding cattle. Other than that, the bulls that should be sold were sold out. According to Robbins Garcia, the next batch of cattle should be imported in September. But this time, Jiang Hai didn't need to buy so many cattle. He only needed to buy some bulls. The calves were also slowly growing up. Next year, they could sell about 15,000 cattle. 10,000 cattle were sold for more than $1 billion. With 15,000 cattle, Jiang Hai's money from selling cattle might exceed $2 billion next year. Of course, this was another story. As long as Jiang Hai sold cattle, no matter how much, Prawalton would buy it because it was really profitable. When Jiang Hai made money, she also made money. This was the best cooperation model. Therefore, Jiang Hai, as a partner, she wouldn't touch him no matter what. However, if she didn't use business methods to deal with Jiang Hai, she really had no other way. She was also very speechless about this, but fortunately, she was also very busy. Now, Prawalton was in charge of the operation of Sam's Club, so she quickly forgot about Jiang Hai for the time being. However, it was fate. Today, she wouldn't have come to New York. She should still be playing happily with the girls in her villa in Atlantic City. However, a dispute at Sam's Club in New York brought her to New York City. After solving the problem, it was already late at night. Although there was nothing wrong with driving back to Atlantic City at this time, she still wanted to be rich. However, she was rich and willful. She didn't want to tire herself out anymore, so she found a 5-star hotel nearby and prepared to check in. For a person of her status, even if she only stayed for a day, she had to stay in a 5-star presidential suite. Unfortunately, this hotel was only a branch. They only had one presidential suite here, and Jiang Hai rented it. The hotel originally wanted to protect the privacy of the residents, but unexpectedly, when checking whether the room had been checked out, Prawalton actually scanned the information of this resident. Prawalton was not an ordinary woman. She was a woman, and being able to control Sam's Club was enough to prove her excellence. Her memory was particularly good, which was also one of her special abilities. With a glance, she happened to see Jiang Hai's name and the code on Jiang Hai's green card. In an instant, she knew that the person who lived here was Jiang Hai. Then she also heard that this Jiang Hai had lived here for 11 days. From the second day onwards, he didn't leave the room. She heard that he was writing and didn't allow others to disturb him. So the hotel didn't knock on Jiang Hai's door. Upon hearing this, Pra Walton felt that Jiang Hai must be up to something, so the scene just now happened. She was ready to force her way into Jiang Hai's room. In fact, the hotel was somewhat worried. They were also afraid that Jiang Hai would really die there. What would they do? In addition, after Pra Walton said that she would be in charge of everything, the person in charge of the hotel was a little hesitant. She even snatched the key card. When Pra Walton used the universal key card to open the door, she found that there was no one in the room. She found that there was no one in the living room of the suite. This made her stunned for a moment. Logically speaking, Jiang Hai should have reacted to the noise outside. After hesitating for a moment, she walked towards the door. Her bodyguard dutifully stopped the others. Soon, Pra Walton arrived outside the master bedroom of the suite. She quietly opened the door. The situation inside the door gave her a fright. Because at this time, her target, Jiang Hai, was lying on the big bed. However, his eyes were closed and his body was red. This gave Pra Walton a fright. She subconsciously thought that something had happened to Jiang Hai. Just as she was about to leave, she stopped. She felt that it was better to see clearly. So she quietly walked to Jiang Hai's side. Looking at Jiang Hai's undulating chest and his breathing, she couldn't help but sigh in relief. It seemed that Jiang Hai was still alive. She felt Jiang Hai's pulse. It was quite strong. Jiang Hai's eyelids were rolled up. Although it was a white eye roll, his pupils were not dilated. He had to admit that the United States medical education was relatively good. At least, they could determine whether a person was dead or not. Most people could determine that. What's more, Pra Walton was a woman who was used to storms. Seeing that Jiang Hai was only asleep or fainted, Pra Walton was relieved. Then she accidentally swept to the side and found an open bottle of sleeping pills. She picked it up and looked at it. There wasn't much less inside. This let her know that Jiang Hai might have fallen asleep. But in fact, this was just Jiang Hai's plan. He was afraid that others would come in and ruin his plan. It was good to put a bottle of sleeping pills and pretend that he was asleep. At least it could scare others. Just like now, Pra Walton was a little scared. In her view, Jiang Hai was asleep. It's really a God-given opportunity. Looking at the naked Jiang Hai lying here, Pra Walton smiled, then picked up the phone and dialed a number on it. The call was connected not long after. Hello, who is at home now? After the call was connected, Pra Walton said to the other side of the phone. Barbara and I are here. Hearing Pra Walton's voice on the phone, a female voice came from the other side of the phone. Then it's the two of you. Drive to New York immediately. Immediately, to room XXX of XXX Hotel. I have something urgent to talk to you. Hearing that the candidates were also there, Pra Walton's face flashed a smile, then she said quickly. After the other side confirmed, she hung up the phone. Looking at Jiang Hai, who was still lying on the bed, her face showed a wicked smile. Okay, it's time to clear out. Since the candidates have been decided, Pra Walton won't let others ruin her plan. As soon as she turned around and left the room, she directly drove the people outside out. Then she sat in the living room and played with her mobile phone. Chapter 479. Miss, what can I do for you? About an hour later, the door was knocked on again. When Pra Walton opened the door, she found that the two girls had already appeared in front of her. These two girls, if Jiang Hai is still awake, will not be too unfamiliar. These two girls are the two girls he saw at Pra Walton's place. One is Asian and the other is Latin American. The Asian is Korean, Lee Zaishan, the American is Cheryl Lee, and the Latin American is Barbara Martina from Argentina. To be honest, these two girls are very good looking, even better than Feng Yunchen and the others. After all, these girls are all found by Pra Walton, and their quality is naturally 1 in a million. Come, let's take some videos. After letting the two girls in, Pra Walton said with a smile. Is it in the hotel? Hearing her words, the faces of the two girls couldn't help but blush, but obviously, it's not that they haven't taken videos before. Of course, the opponent is Prawalton. Rich people will always have some strange hobbies. Looking at the situation, Prawalton has done a lot of this before. Well, come in with me. Looking at their appearance, Prawalton didn't care. She waved her hand and led them into the master bedroom of this suite. But as soon as they entered the bedroom, they saw Jiang Hai lying on the bed peacefully at this time. Seeing this scene, their faces turned pale in an instant. They thought this was a murder scene. Don't be afraid, he's just asleep. Seeing the appearance of the two girls, Prawalton couldn't help but roll her eyes at them, and then said calmly. Sure enough, after hearing her words, the two women were relieved when they saw Jiang Hai's chest still moving up and down. As long as he's still alive, they don't care, but now they are curious about why Prawalton asked them to come here. You guys, take off your clothes and do it with him. I'll film from the side. When they looked at Prawalton also said excitedly. Hearing her words, the two women's faces turned even paler. No, Pulla, we are yours, we love you, we have never betrayed you, you can't do this. Looking at the Prawalton crowd, the Latino girls screamed in disbelief. Don't worry, I won't abandon you just because you've done it with him. You'll always be mine. But now, I need you to do me a small favor. I've done you a favor, and you've said that you'll repay it. Now, it's time to repay it. Hearing the girl's words, Prawalton raised her head slightly crazily, looked at the two women in front of her, and said seriously. Hearing her resolute words, the two women were dumbfounded. But even though they were dumbfounded, it didn't mean that Prawalton would let them go. She kept urging them. On one side was the man they hated, and on the other side was the woman they loved. The two women were a little confused for a while. He just stood there, unable to advance or retreat. Just like that, he was in a daze. Seeing this scene, Prawalton walked directly in front of them and tore off their clothes. It's summer now, and the two women didn't wear much. Now that she pulled them, they didn't resist and were stripped naked. Then, Prawalton pushed them to Jiang Hai. Be good, just once is enough. Men are not like us, they can't last long. Don't worry, you will always be mine. This matter will be over as soon as I close my eyes. Looking at the two women in front of her who were just lying there in a deadlock, Prawalton, who had adjusted her position, urged and encouraged them. But it's our first time, we. Listening to Prawalton's urging, the two Asian women couldn't help but raise their heads and look at Prawalton with a pleading look. They really didn't want to do this. The first time is just a layer of membrane, it will break sooner or later. I do this for Selena Gomez, and also for you. I want you to know that men are nothing. It's not as good as our fingers and tongues. I want you to know what's wrong with men, so that you can stop thinking about them as soon as possible. Seeing that the two were still hesitating, Prawalton said seriously. Hearing Prawalton's words, the two women here were also disheartened at this time. Listening to Prawalton's instructions, they climbed onto Jiang Hai's body and grabbed it with trembling hands. But then they found that this thing was soft and there was no way to put it in, so they looked at Prawalton for help. I don't know much about this, I remember that pay TV should have. Seeing this scene, Prawalton hesitated for a moment. The reason why she likes women is that she will talk about it later. She is the same as Selena. She also likes women after being hurt by men, but she doesn't want to think about the process of being hurt. Suddenly, she saw the TV that was still on. She couldn't help but slap her forehead, then she changed the TV to a channel that only adults can watch. Sure enough, this channel is very good. As soon as she changed it, a film was on. Come, learn from them. Looking at the scene in front of her, to be honest, Prawalton felt a little uncomfortable. After all, she likes women, not men, so she can't accept normal things. But now, in order to film Jiang Hai, she has to do this, so she ordered the two women on the bed. Hearing Prawalton's words, the two women glanced at the program on the TV, then slowly closed their eyes and turned their heads to the side. When it was 6, their tears flowed down. Looking at the two women's tears, although Pra Walton also felt a little regretful, she quickly adjusted her mentality and took out her phone to film. As the TV progressed, soon, a woman stood up with a trembling body, endured the pain, and sat on Jiang Hai's body. An inexplicable battle began. At the beginning, whether it was Cheryl or Barbara, they were embarrassed, painful, and humiliated, but later, it seemed that they took some initiative. At this time, Jiang Hai, in the sea of consciousness, he unconsciously watched the giant flood dragon transcend 779 lightning tribulations and transform into a dragon. When the sun shone on the dragon's body, Jiang Hai also became one with the dragon. When he felt the release of his body, suddenly, a soft feeling came from the back of his waist, as if he was going to the toilet. Generally, when people dream of going to the toilet while sleeping, the only possibility is that you really want to go to the toilet. Jiang Hai also had such a dream before, so he subconsciously prepared to open his eyes. But the moment he opened his eyes, the scene in front of him made him a little confused. At this time, in front of him, an Asian woman was sitting on his body, and another Latin American woman was lying in front of his chest, licking his chest. The feeling of wanting to go to the toilet just now came from the pincer attack of these two people. Looking at the scene in front of him, Jiang Hai was stunned. The moment he was stunned, the strength he had been guarding couldn't help but loosen. After the person on top of him screamed, the woman weakly lay on Jiang Hai's chest. She subconsciously looked up and found that Jiang Hai's eyes were wide open. Ah! Seeing this scene, the woman immediately screamed. At the same time, she and the other woman turned over and climbed on the bed, pulling the quilt on the bed to cover themselves. Jiang Hai also sat up from the bed. What the hell is this? Cough, you're awake, but it's useless even if you wake up, because I have already recorded it. You scumbag, you should be prepared to let Selena be disappointed in you. When Jiang Hai looked around, he found that he was indeed in his room, but there were 3 more people in his room at this time. In addition to the 2 women, there was also a familiar face, Pra Walton. When Pra Walton saw Jiang Hai, she was also shocked. To be honest, the battle just now made her feel a little emotional. Now she was standing there with some weakness in her legs, but when she saw Jiang Hai looking at her, she still said firmly, "You're digging your own grave." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Without saying a word, he directly pulled Pra Walton to the bed. The third battle began, but this time, Jiang Hai only targeted one person, Pra Walton. Pra Walton never thought that she would be like this in her life, but what can she do? Being pulled to the bed by Jiang Hai, Pra Walton didn't have a chance to resist at all. Jiang Hai directly tore off her clothes, and under her surprised gaze, he directly entered, not giving Pra Walton time to react at all. Feeling the impact of Jiang Hai, Pra Walton was completely stunned this time. She never thought that she would lose. Of course, she didn't know that Jiang Hai would suddenly wake up in the middle of the recording. If she had known, she would have run away in the middle of the recording. Why would she still be here? She wanted to call the bodyguards outside, but according to the soundproof ability of this room, it was estimated that it would be useless even if she called. Most importantly, if she really called in, how could she explain herself like this? So although she wanted to kill Jiang Hai directly, she could only shut her mouth tightly and not let herself make a sound. If other people were attracted, then she would be in trouble. She was Pra Walton. Chapter 480. Do you know if there's anything fun to do recently? Looking at Robbins Garcia and Edward Anderson in front of him, Jiang Hai asked them. Yes, Jiang Hai is not from the United States, and he doesn't know much about the situation here. So he doesn't know if there's anything fun to do, so it's better to ask the locals. After hanging up the phone with Selena Gomez, Jiang Hai directly found the 2 who had returned from work and asked them. August, there doesn't seem to be any festivals, and there's nothing fun to do. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia thought about it first, and there really isn't anything fun to do, especially when Jiang Hai said that there is nothing fun to do. Hey, Jiang, it's useless to ask him. Cowboys have no other festivals except for the traditional festivals in the United States. If you ask what's fun, you have to ask me. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, Edward Anderson laughed first. Oh. What's fun about being a sailor? Hearing what he said, not only Robbins Garcia, but also Jiang Hai became interested. If you want to talk about fun, there is one of the most fun things to do in August, fishing. Looking at Jiang Hai and Robbins Garcia, Edward Anderson said with a serious expression on his face. But after saying that, Jiang Hai and Robbins Garcia couldn't help but look at him with contempt. Fishing is also considered fun? Are you kidding me? Can't you fish all year round? Fishing is not ordinary fishing, it's fishing for big fish, tuna. Understanding the meaning in Jiang Hai's eyes, Edward Anderson didn't care and continued to explain with a smile. Tuna. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be taken aback. He is no stranger to tuna because there are a lot of tuna in his fishery. Especially recently, when he went into the water a few days ago, he found that there were more tuna. Originally, the tuna in Jiang Hai's fishery were only the bluefin tuna that was chased by the group of sharks. But recently, Jiang Hai found that the tuna in the fishery had increased a lot. In addition to bluefin tuna, there were yellowfin, masu, and big-eyed tuna, which made Jiang Hai a little confused. However, the number of these things has not reached the warning line in Jiang Hai's heart, so Jiang Hai doesn't care and just let them swim here. Anyway, these things are quite valuable. But now that they are talking about fishing for tuna, Jiang Hai is a little confused, and he couldn't help but look at Edward Anderson in front of him. June and July of each year is the time for tuna to spawn, so North America agreed that the time to catch tuna each year is only August, September, October, and November. The remaining August is to give these fish time to recuperate. Of course, I heard that in Asia, Taiwan, Japan, and Korea are all harvested all year round. They are not afraid of this fish going extinct. Looking at Jiang Hai, Edward Anderson explained that tuna has a fixed fishing time in North America. They can't be caught at other times, and the most important thing is that if you want to catch these fish, it is useless during these months. First of all, you have to apply for a fishing license. The Constitution of North America is basically formulated by the United States, and Canada follows suit. If the Americans say that fishing is not allowed casually, then fishing is not allowed casually. If you want to fish in North America, you need to spend money to buy a fishing license. Beginner fishing licenses, intermediate fishing licenses, advanced fishing licenses, river fishing licenses, sea fishing licenses, etc. Different fishing licenses corresponded to different kinds of fish. If you catch a high-level fish with a beginner fishing license, then you have to release it. Otherwise, if others see it, they will sue you. If you want to fish for tuna, you need the highest level of rare economic fish fishing license, and you want to apply for this kind of license. To get this license, you need at least 5 years of sea fishing experience, but this doesn't matter. If Jiang Hai says that he has 5 years of sea fishing experience, no one will know. If you have money, you can do anything. In Winthrop, it is very easy for Jiang Hai to get this license. However, the longest valid period for this license is 4 weeks. After this period, you have to go back and get it again. But Edward Anderson doesn't care. In the past, if he had nothing to do, he would float at sea and fish for tuna for 4 months. Because if he was lucky, the tuna caught in these 4 months would be equivalent to several years of income. Even a small boat can catch hundreds of thousands of dollars. Of course, the premise is that you have good luck. After all, with the increasing consumption of tuna in Japan, the number of tuna is declining rapidly. It is no longer the era of a few decades ago when it was not a lot to catch 100 or so tuna a day. Now, it is considered lucky to catch 100 or so tuna in a season. After all, the resources are there. Tuna fishing? It seems quite fun, then let's go to the Caribbean Sea. Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Jiang Hai touched his chin and said with excitement. But when they heard his words, Edward Anderson and Robbins Garcia were dumbfounded. They looked at Jiang Hai strangely, their eyes seemed to say, "Are you crazy?" Boss, it is best to fish for tuna, especially Atlantic bluefin tuna, in the northern hemisphere because there are more of them than in the southern hemisphere, and most importantly, there are 3 holy lands for tuna fishing next to us. Why go to South America? Looking at Jiang Hai, Edward Anderson organized his words and then asked Jiang Hai with some confusion. This matter is also recognized in the world. There are much more Atlantic bluefin tuna in the northern hemisphere than in the southern hemisphere. This fish is a semi-temperate species, so it is rare in the tropics, and there are a total of 5 holy lands for fishing this fish in the Atlantic Ocean. 2 of them are in Europe, Las Palmas in Spain and Siracusa in Sicily, Italy. The other 3 are in North America, including the Gulf of St. Lawrence in Canada, George Shoals where Canada and the United States coexist, and Cape Cod in Massachusetts, which is less than 100 nautical miles away from Jiang Hai. Usually, Edward Anderson and the others would go to Cape Cod to fish for tuna. Who would go to the Caribbean Sea for no reason? Well, because I made an appointment with Selena Gomez to go out for a week. Don't you think it's interesting to go all the way south and drive a yacht? Jiang Hai was stunned when he heard Edward Anderson's words. Because Jiang Hai has been a little tangled since he learned that the fishery makes money, because the sea in the southern hemisphere actually has many advantages over the sea in the northern hemisphere. The fish there grow all year round, they are big, they have a variety of species, they are easy to raise, and they can play on the beach everywhere throughout the year, which is a very cool thing. Now he is in Boston, and 5 months of the year have nothing to do with the sea. So he has always thought that there must be more fish in the south than in the north. Maybe the quality of the fish is not so good, but the quantity is definitely more. But now, when he heard Edward Anderson's words, Jiang Hai was a little confused. So there are more Atlantic bluefin tuna in the south than in the north? Jiang Hai really wanted to go fishing for tuna, but in his opinion, more importantly, he wanted to go to the Caribbean Sea to retrieve the treasure from the shipwreck. However, he needed a good reason to do so. Jiang Hai wanted to go fishing for tuna, but in his opinion, he wanted to go to the Caribbean Sea to retrieve the treasure from the shipwreck. His eyes turned, and he thought of Selena Gomez. Originally, he just wanted to take her out to play, but now she has become the main reason. This made Jiang Hai apologize to Selena Gomez in his heart. But he must go to South America. He still remembers his agreement with Du Feynman. It's almost 2 months now. Who knows when this guy will turn hostile? I must get the money before he turns hostile. In fact, there is still a lot of cash in Jiang Hai's bank card, a total of 800 million yuan. This is the money he earned from selling cattle during the time he came back. This is the money that Zhang Dihai and Pra Walton transferred to him, but he can't touch this money because 600 million yuan and this money is to be paid in April next year. Tax evasion is a huge crime in the United States. Jiang Hai doesn't dare to take the initiative to give the American government a handle, so he can't touch this money. He can only think of other ways. He must get the shipwreck. No one will feel too safe. It's always better to have more trump cards than to be unprepared. If this is the case, then we don't seem to have anything to say. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson can't help but feel a little speechless. Jiang Hai's main purpose of going to sea this time is not to fish for tuna, but to pick up girls. Then there is nothing they can do, but it is understandable. Fishing for tuna, if you are lucky, you can only catch a few $100,000 in 4 months. Does Jiang Hai lack these few $100,000? Just selling a few cattle and getting back a few $100,000. In the eyes of the Americans, Jiang Hai is rich and capricious. Since Jiang Hai has decided, and he is the boss, the whole manor is in operation. The best way to fish for tuna is to use a small boat or a fishing boat. Jiang Hai has a small boat and a fishing boat, but his main purpose this time is to pick up girls, so he must drive his Zalaza LSX 120. However, there is an extra platform on the other side of the boat. It is a place to hang a small boat, so it is convenient to fish. If the big boat is not convenient, he can use a small boat to fish. After all, the boat is too big, and the fish are not blind, so it is not easy to fish. Other than that, there is the confirmation of the crew and the confirmation of the route. Because the place Jiang Hai is going to this time is too far, it is destined that he can't bring too many people. Edward Anderson and Robbins Garcia are definitely not able to do it. Aphrodite and the others who went with Jiang Hai last time are also very busy. The grapes are about to ripen, and it is the most critical month. They can be harvested at the beginning of September, so Jiang Hai will naturally come back before then. Xiaoya can't withstand too much light, so Bernice naturally has to accompany her. This time, in Jiang Hai's manor, there are only 5 people that Jiang Hai trusts the most: Delina, Marian, Azalina, Belle Lester, and Harriman Fells. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't want to bring the other 2, but for safety reasons, he still brought them. Chapter 481. Hi, how are you? In front of a port in New York City, when Jiang Hai's yacht stopped at the side, Selena Gomez had already walked up with her small suitcase. Looking at everyone who was looking at her from the plate armor, she couldn't help but smile and wave her hand, then naturally stuffed the suitcase into Jiang Hai's hands. Seeing this scene, Daliana and Marian couldn't help but roll their eyes at Jiang Hai. They knew that this guy was up to no good. Oh, come in and take a rest first, we will leave after replenishing the fuel and fresh water. As if sensing the gaze of his 2 daughters, Jiang Hai smiled and said to Selena Gomez. Okay, don't you, come in and take a rest? Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Selena Gomez couldn't help but raise her eyebrows, and at the same time, she whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. Jiang Hai couldn't help but be excited. But he still held back. He can do whatever he wants at sea, but for now, he has to focus on business. Hee. Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Selena Gomez smiled, took back her luggage, and went to her room under the lead of Daliana. Jiang Hai, Belle, and Harriman Fells were preparing fresh water and food. Jiang Hai was an impulsive person. If he wanted to do something, he would rely more on his hot-bloodedness. This was the legendary 3 minutes of hot-bloodedness. Once that hot-bloodedness was exhausted, he would often lose interest in this kind of thing. For example, he likes guns. When he first got a gun, he used it every day, but after a month, he lost interest. For example, he likes to ride horses. He hasn't been riding for long. Little Xia is now more of a decoration. Of course, Jiang Hai still goes to see it every day and takes it out to play. This is also what Jiang Hai does in the manor. Therefore, Jiang Hai decided to go to sea this time as well. He only prepared for 2 days before going to sea. There are a lot of things that need to be prepared for going to sea, such as GPS, radio, and walkie-talkies. Plus, this time, Jiang Hai is going fishing. On the surface, he is going fishing, so sonar and so on are indispensable. Among these people, only Jiang Hai knows how to sail, so these things need to be prepared by Jiang Hai. Fortunately, although Edward Anderson is not going, he helped Jiang Hai prepare everything. In addition to these hardware things, there are many other things that need to be prepared. The first and most important thing is fresh water. Although there was plenty of water on the sea, the water was salty and undrinkable. Therefore, the water was definitely not good. In addition to drinking, the fresh water also needs to be prepared for bathing. After all, after bathing with seawater, there will be a salty smell. When it dries, there will be salt particles, which is very unpleasant. So the bathing water needs to be prepared in advance. Of course, Jiang Hai's yacht is not an old ship. It has a seawater purification machine that can turn seawater into drinking water. If you don't dare to drink it, you can at least turn the seawater into bath water. But even so, Jiang Hai prepared a lot of water in the cabin. After all, this is his first time going to sea. Although it's not his first time going to the Caribbean, after all, he has been to Miami before. But this is his first time sailing, so it is always good to be careful. In addition to fresh water, the second most important thing is oil, diesel, because it is related to the voyage of the entire ship. In addition to filling up the tank, Jiang Hai also prepared 3 barrels of diesel. He is not afraid of causing trouble in case of a fire. In any case, Jiang Hai also prepared a lot of diesel. But in addition to these things, there are many other things that need to be prepared, such as weapons. Carrying weapons everywhere, no matter in which country, is a felony and extremely dangerous. But this is the sea, so it's hard to say. Because if there is a conflict, then what Jiang Hai and the others have to do is to survive until the Coast Guard arrives. At this time, if they don't have a weapon to defend themselves, then it's not a very good thing. So this time, Jiang Hai and the others brought a lot of weapons, including Jiang Hai's big Desert Eagle and August. Apart from that, he also borrowed the M134 from the Winthrop police station. With this weapon, it would be best if no one came to provoke them. Otherwise, even a small boat would be blown up. In addition to him, Belle Lester and Azalina Vicaborio also prepared some weapons in case of emergencies. In addition to these weapons, Jiang Hai has a lot of food, all kinds of food. Beer, vodka, drinks, snacks, chips, fruits, beef, chicken, bread, flour, and so on. He had almost moved the entire kitchen of his house over. But compared to his kitchen, there are all kinds of vegetables, such as sweet potatoes, cucumbers, and so on. Among the fruits, Jiang Hai brought the most were apples and lemons, which he did not like to eat. He did not like apples because they were troublesome. Lemons because they were too sour, but these two things are indispensable when going out to sea. When going out to sea, it is inevitable that there will be storms and waves. When it is too swaying to eat, the main food to eat is apples, which can replenish water and have enough nutrition. It is also the easiest thing to swallow. Lemons are indispensable because without lemons, it is easy to get septicemia. Jiang Hai does not know the specific reason, but Edward Anderson is very familiar with these things. He is responsible for most of these things. At the same time, he told Jiang Hai to replenish fuel, fresh water, and other necessities at every place. Of course, the most important thing is various kinds of medicine, antibiotics, and vitamins. These things are absolutely indispensable. This is Jiang Hai's first time going out to sea. Although it is just a lap along the coast of the United States, to be honest, everyone is not very relieved. If it is not because the place Jiang Hai is going to is too far away, they will not let Jiang Hai go there. There is no harm in being careful. Jiang Hai has always known that the sea is not a very safe place. So he has been following what Edward Anderson told him. Even if it is just driving from Winthrop to New York to pick up Selena Gomez, Jiang Hai has replenished the fresh water and diesel consumed during this period of time. At the same time, he bought some fresh fruits at the harbor here. After everything is settled, Jiang Hai and the others returned to the yacht and headed for their next destination. According to the route that Edward Anderson originally planned for them, after picking up people in New York, their second stop should have been Atlantic City. However, because Pa Walton lives in Atlantic City, Jiang Hai and Selena Gomez are afraid of her, they decided not to go to Atlantic City, but to Atlantic City in Delaware. Speaking of Delaware, it is a bit interesting. It is also known as the Delaware State. In the United States, this state is quite famous, but it is not famous. It is famous because it is a state that everyone in the United States who went to school in the United States knows about. Because it is the first state to join the United States, it is also known as the first state. Its political status is even more impressive than Washington. However, it is the least famous state because it has no special products and no economic achievements. The most famous scenic spot in the whole state is called the Marshall Steam Museum. It is a place to collect steam cars. Other than that, there are some famous people's manors and the like. It can be said that this place wasn't famous. The state's primary industry was the forest industry, the secondary industry was the light industry, and the tertiary industry was the service industry. The most famous industry in this place was the DuPont Foundation, which was located here. However, Jiang Hai does not have any contact with DuPont, so he came here purely to spend the night, nothing more. After the boat set off in New York, Jiang Hai set the coordinates. When he set the coordinates, Selena Gomez has already arrived at his cabin. After the two met, there is naturally no need to say much. Jiang Hai knows why she came here, and she also knows why he came here. After everything was settled, the two hugged each other and began to fight in the captain's cabin. Jiang Hai's physical fitness naturally does not need to be mentioned, and Selena Gomez is also experiencing a long drought. After the two fought for 2 hours, Selena Gomez was like a puddle of mud, lying on Jiang Hai's body, constantly gasping for breath. Jiang Hai also carried her to his boss chair. Although he has completed it twice, he still insists on staying in Selena Gomez's body, gently moving from time to time. You are still so powerful. I thought, after so long. I can beat you. It seems that my combat power is still not enough. Selena Gomez leaned against Jiang Hai's ear and gently bit his ear. Then, she blew into his ear and said weakly, "Don't worry, Jiang Hai, I'll be fine." You want to beat me? You are still far from it. Listening to Selena Gomez's words, Jiang Hai smiled and patted her butt. It seems that your wife will have a hard time in the future. Either she accepts having you with another woman, or she will die in your hands sooner or later. It's really lovable. Gently biting Jiang Hai's shoulder, Selena Gomez said slowly. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai can't help but feel a little embarrassed. He always can't handle such a topic. Hurry up and do it again. I haven't had lunch yet. Seeing that Jiang Hai is silent, Selena leaned over and whispered. Chapter 482. I find that I like you a little, what should I do? With her head buried in Jiang Hai's neck, Selena Gomez whispered on Jiang Hai's body. Listening to her words, Jiang Hai's hands that were stroking her back couldn't help but stagnate. What's wrong? Are you scared? Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Selena Gomez raised her head and looked at Jiang Hai and said. Of course not, I just don't know if you are serious. If you are, then you have to consider quitting the entertainment industry. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile, then his hands moved again. That's more like it, don't worry, I like you a little, but I just like you, okay? Hearing Jiang Hai's answer that satisfied her, Selena Gomez said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curl his lips. Am I a duckling? You still need to explain it in a sentence? This is the 7th day after Jiang Hai set off from Winthrop, and it is also the last day of their trip. From Winthrop, to be honest, the journey was very calm, except for sometimes the wind and waves were a little big, nothing happened. During the day, Jiang Hai and the others played in the sea, and at night, they stopped at a nearby town to rest. Along the way, they also saw the local customs on the east coast of the Sea Kingdom. On the first day, they went to Atlantic City in Delaware. On the second day, they went to the most famous Virginia Beach in Virginia, and on the third day, they went to Cedar Island in North Carolina. On the fourth day, they went to Charleston in South Carolina, and on the fifth day, they went to Georgia's Savannah in Georgia. On the sixth day, they arrived in Florida, and not long after, they went to Jacksonville, the largest city in the state. On the seventh day, that is, tonight, they arrived in Miami, but instead of going to the city to rest, they rested directly on the ship. These days, the relationship between Jiang Hai and Selena Gomez is rapidly warming up. Because the two of them had already passed first base, second base, and third base, directly hitting home runs. At first, it was fun to play on the surface of the sea. But later, there was nothing fun to do on the surface of the sea. Therefore, they began to fight day and night. In the captain's cabin, in their rooms, in the bathroom, on the floor, and even at night in the kitchen, on the armor, on the platform, and on the small boat, there were traces of their battle. So much so that several times, Jiang Hai felt that Delina and Marion were looking at them strangely. And almost every time Biyao docked, he would disembark and go to the nearby town to play. The next day, he would come back with some cosmetics. Jiang Hai naturally knew why, but Selena Gomez and Jiang Hai liked it a little. The only ones who did not move were Azalina and Harriman Ferns. Harriman really did not understand these things. As for Azalina, Jiang Hai did not know if she had solved it herself, but she did not seem to be acting strangely. Because of these days and nights of fighting and chatting, the two of them became more and more familiar with each other. Not only did they know more about each other's bodies, but they also knew everything about each other. For example, Selena knew that Jiang Hai had been married before, and she also knew about Jiang Hai's current situation. She also knew about Jiang Hai's family situation. Of course, no matter who it was, Jiang Hai would not tell anyone about the Dragon Balls. Jiang Hai also learned about her situation. This girl, born in 1992, became famous very early. At the age of 15, she became famous in the United States because of a Disney movie. Then, she starred in 3 original Disney movies. But what she really liked was music. In 2009, she switched to the music battlefield, and the results were very good. She also told Jiang Hai about her love life. Her first boyfriend was called Tyler Lautner, the one who played the werewolf in Twilight. But that was actually just a publicity stunt. The two of them only got along for a few days, and after a few meetings, they broke up. Later, her real first love, Justin, was a scumbag. Because this guy not only had a debauched private life, but he was also very insensible. Selena Gomez could not stand it. The two of them broke up and got back together. It was not until the year before last that they completely broke up. But after they broke up, Justin still talked about the things between them everywhere. At that time, Selena Gomez almost went crazy. Then, she met Jiang Hai. According to her, Jiang Hai had completely let her come out of the world of men. Because now the person imprinted in her heart was called Jiang Hai. But, are you really not going to stay by my side? His hand slowly moved from Selena Gomez's back to her head. Jiang Hai asked her with a little hesitation in his words. Maybe, but now my career is on the rise. Rise, do you understand? Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Selena Gomez also buried her head deeper and deeper, and said seriously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also cupped her pretty face and kissed her affectionately. The two kissed for about 3 minutes. Selena Gomez struggled to get up, gasping for breath. Are you trying to suffocate me? Looking at the coquettish Selena Gomez, Jiang Hai also smiled. Still smiling, it seems that you have recovered. Then, let's continue. Looking at Jiang Hai's smile, Selena Gomez glanced at Jiang Hai. Her hand slowly slid down, and then her head followed. Feeling Selena Gomez's movements, Jiang Hai also sat up. For times the combat power of a human body is not comparable to her. Aren't you afraid that you can't go to the field tomorrow? Patting her butt, Jiang Hai said to her with a smile. Compared to your mouth, I prefer to kiss you here. Do you know why? Selena Gomez looked up at Jiang Hai and said to Jiang Hai. Not very clear. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was puzzled. He really didn't understand what she meant. Because it doesn't talk nonsense. Looking at her disdainful smile, Jiang Hai knew that he was going to take this battle seriously. Whoosh. The sound of planes taking off and landing could be heard outside the Miami airport. The people standing here at this time were none other than Jiang Hai and the others. After 7 days of fun, Selena Gomez was going back to New York today, and Jiang Hai was going to do what he had to do. Goodbye, I will go to Winthrop when I have time. Selena Gomez hugged Jiang Hai for the last time outside the airport and said with a serious face. In the past 7 days, the two people who were not very familiar with each other became the most familiar people in the world. At least for Selena Gomez, Jiang Hai was definitely the person who knew her best. But now they were going to separate like this. To be honest, she was a little reluctant, but she thought it through. She also learned something from Jiang Hai's words. Jiang Hai was more or less a Wuxia person. She was a star. First, she couldn't take care of her husband and children at home, at least not now. Second, after all, she had a relationship with Justin before. Compared with the second point, the first point was more important. So she knew very well that she and Jiang Hai had no chance. She knew that this was not good. She should break up with Jiang Hai directly, but sometimes, feelings couldn't be broken just because you said so. You must come to me, I remember what you said. Looking at Selena Gomez beside him, Jiang Hai also smiled. The two looked at each other again, but they didn't do anything too intimate. After all, this was the airport, and she was a public figure, so they just hugged, looked at each other, and then smiled. Jiang Hai watched Selena Gomez go through the security check. Until he couldn't see her, Jiang Hai turned around and returned to the parking lot. At this time, in the parking lot, in a car, Delina, Marion, Azalina, and Belle Lester were all waiting for Jiang Hai. At this time, Harriman Fells was still looking after the ship. This big guy always carried out Jiang Hai's orders without a single mistake. Seeing Jiang Hai come back alone, the people in the car were obviously relieved. It seems that I don't have to go out every night. Seeing Jiang Hai come back, Belle Lester chuckled. You don't have to go. Hearing his words, Delina and Marion couldn't help but blush. As for Azalina, she was much more shameless. She raised her head and smiled at him. Ah. Hearing Azalina's words, Belle Lester was stunned for a moment. He suddenly had a feeling. Did Azalina fall for him? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at himself in the rearview mirror. He really did look handsome. You can go and have sex with Harriman. However, it was obvious that he was overthinking because Azalina's next words made him feel depressed. He knew that this rose with thorns would not be so easy to pluck. Moreover, he vaguely felt that this woman was very curious about his boss, and there was also an indescribable feeling. Okay, let's go back. At this time, Jiang Hai also walked to the front of the car. This car was rented by them. It was a 7-seater business car. Jiang Hai opened the door of the front passenger seat and sat in the front passenger seat. He then said to Belle Lester, "Let's go." "Boss, now that we sent Selena Gomez away, where are we going?" While starting the engine and driving the car out of the airport, Belle Lester asked Jiang Hai. He was indeed a little curious. "We're going to fish for tuna." But after hearing his words, Jiang Hai replied with certainty. "Ah." But after hearing Jiang Hai's words, he was a little confused. Fish for tuna? Bullsh *T. Although they came out this time to fish for tuna, it didn't look like they were fishing for tuna. Chapter 483. Boss, we're almost at Isabella. Listening to Belle Lester's voice, Jiang Hai also woke up from his sleep. He rubbed his eyes and looked at the distant land. He couldn't help but stretch his body. Ah, we're finally here. Jiang Hai said with a smile as he held the platform in front of him. It was the 9th day since Jiang Hai set off from Winthrop. In the first 7 days, he had been playing along the coast of the United States. On the 7th day, he arrived in Miami. In order to send Selena Gomez back on the 8th day, Jiang Hai specially rested in Miami for a day. After everything was settled, Jiang Hai rushed to the south on the 9th day. Their destination this time was Isabella. Of course, it was just the name of a city in this country. This country was called Puerto Rico. Speaking of which, there was a reason why they chose this country. South America was not much more peaceful than Africa. It was particularly chaotic, especially near the Caribbean Sea. After all, this place had been Europe's backyard from the very beginning. Wars had never stopped fighting for territory. The relationship with the United States was also messy. Some were hostile, some were ambiguous, and some even wanted to become a state of the United States. There were 20 countries on the Caribbean Sea. They were Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Venezuela, Cuba, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Antigua and Barbuda, the Dominican Federation, Trinidad and Tobago, and so on. Although there were many countries, Jiang Hai didn't have many places to choose. These countries were either in chaos or in the territory of other countries. A gentleman wouldn't stand under a collapsing wall. Although Jiang Hai was not a gentleman, he was at least afraid of death. If he was targeted, who would be responsible? In addition to these countries, there were also some that were not friendly to the United States, such as Cuba. This is a spy planted by our Great Red Alliance beside the United States. If Japan is the United States outpost, then Cuba is our outpost. Although Jiang Hai is now a member of the imperial court, this ship is still an American ship. Moreover, the people on the ship were all Americans. If they went and offended others, they would be in big trouble. Therefore, he couldn't go to countries like Cuba. After some calculations, the only country he could go to was Puerto Rico. Speaking of which, this country was quite pitiful. You could say that this country was a proper country, but they didn't even admit that they were a proper country. You could say that they weren't a proper country, but they were still a proper country. Puerto Rico was originally the home of the Taino tribe. Later, it was discovered by Columbus in 1493 and named San Juan Island. In 1508, the Spanish established a colony here and made it a Spanish territory. At the end of the 19th century, the Spanish-American War broke out. At that time, Spain was already finished, so it was defeated by the United States. This place became the territory of the United States, and at first, the United States also wanted to colonize this place. But the people here had been harmed by the Spanish, so they were unwilling and resisted. In 1950, they even tried to assassinate the President of the United States. When the Americans saw this, they felt that this country was unstable, burdensome, and did not have any strategic resources like oil. Why would they want this country? So, in 1952, the United States told Puerto Rico that they were free, and they should go and govern themselves. The United States doesn't want them because of defense and the United Nations vote. So, the United States still has the final say in defense, foreign affairs, and tariffs. As for the rest, do as you see fit. Do whatever you want, and the Puerto Ricans were left in a daze. They didn't expect freedom to come so easily. At first, they were happy, but later, they became more and more confused. Freedom was here, but there was nothing on their island. Other than some cocoa beans that could be sold, there was nothing else. There was no heavy industry, no light industry, and not even a processing industry for agricultural products. The Puerto Ricans were dumbfounded again. Without the support of their godfather in the United States and the dumping of large amounts of food, they really had a problem even eating. This was different from the relationship between big countries. For example, in the Wuxia, the things from the United States came in to attack the Chinese market. These things could have been made in the Chinese market, so there were tariffs and restrictions. But Puerto Rico had nothing. He was a beggar. Then, a rich man said, "Work for me, and I'll give you money to spend." In the end, after working for 2 days, the beggar felt that the rich man was exploiting him. He felt unhappy and wanted freedom, so he started to resist. At first, the rich man said, "Don't leave, you'll starve to death if you leave." But he refused and insisted on leaving. If he didn't leave, he would kill the rich man. So, the rich man said, "Just leave." When he came out, he realized that he was still a beggar. He didn't know anything and couldn't work anywhere else. So he could only shamelessly ask to come back, but the United States government didn't want him to come back. They didn't want him anymore. During the 2012 elections, Puerto Rico had its fourth vote on whether to change its relationship with the United States. There were a total of 3 options. Become a state of the United States, expand its autonomy, and become completely independent. 8 million people in the country had the right to vote. In the end, 3 million people voted, and 61% of the people supported becoming the 51st state of the United States. 33% of the people wanted to expand their autonomy, and only 5% were in favor of complete independence. But after the vote, the Americans still said, "I don't want you. You can vote however you want." This made Puerto Rico very embarrassed. So now, although it was an independent country in name, the people in this country were all saying, "We're Americans, we're the 51st state of the United States." What was kneeling and licking? This was kneeling and licking. Jiang Hai didn't think much of it. The Americans would naturally receive the best treatment here. So Jiang Hai decided to come here. While fishing for tuna, he could also look for treasure. Of course, the treasure was the most important. To Jiang Hai, tuna was just a toy, and the treasure was the foundation of his life. The place he chose, Isabella, was a city that couldn't even be found on Baidu. Firstly, it was because the city was too small. Secondly, it was because there wasn't much to say about the city. Everyone wasn't very familiar with it. This city was the same for Shanghai. Whatever this city had, the Caribbean had. Coral reefs, all kinds of fish, sunshine, beaches, and beautiful women were the least valuable things in the Caribbean. Therefore, there really wasn't much to say about it. When Shanghai's boat approached Isabella's harbor, the largest boat in the harbor was Shanghai's yacht. Shanghai also looked out from the captain's cabin. He only saw a row of low bungalows forming a small town in front of him. Of course, this was not the city center of Isabella. At most, this was a small town by the docks, but it was still evident. When the boat arrived at the dock, even the person in charge of the dock was alarmed. He immediately ran out of his cabin. "Hello, are you tourists from the United States?" Looking at Shanghai and the others who tied the boat to the pier's stone pillars, the person in charge carefully walked over and asked Shanghai and the others while stammering. "Oh, yes, we're here to fish for tuna." Although Shanghai wanted to laugh at the person in charge's careful look, he didn't because he was really afraid that if he laughed, he would scare this guy. "Oh, welcome, welcome. Your arrival really brightens our town. I'm the security guard of this dock. Are you going to Isabella or just stay in our town?" Hearing Shanghai's words, the guard captain continued to speak with his unfamiliar accent and said excitedly to Shanghai, "Oh, we'll live on the boat, but we should buy some things or find some food here." Seeing his enthusiasm, Shanghai was a little confused. These guys can't be thinking of selling the boat to him after his people get off, right? It's better to be careful in this unfamiliar place. Hearing Shanghai's words, the guard captain smiled and nodded. "Be careful, I always feel that these people are too intimate." After meeting with the guard captain, Shanghai deliberately pulled the people around him and said something to them. To be honest, Shanghai was a little confused, hearing Shanghai's words, although they may not think so. After all, Shanghai was the boss, so whatever he said was the truth. At this time, the boat had been sailing for a day, and the sky was gradually getting dark. Shanghai asked Delina, Marion, Azalina, and Harriman Fells to stay on the boat and be careful of these intimate locals. He went to the town with Belle Lester. Shanghai brought a lot of food this time, especially beef, a lot. However, they still had to replenish their water, and sooner or later they would have to deal with the residents here, so they came to check it out first. If the residents here were kind, then it would be good to get some local food, wine, and so on. Obviously, Shanghai was overthinking things. When Shanghai and Belle Lester walked into the town, almost everyone who saw them nodded kindly. It was understandable. After all, among the 1.3 million people, only 5% of them were like the nationalistic youths in China. They wanted to kill all Americans. The remaining 95% had a good impression of Americans. There were even a lot of young girls who secretly gave Shanghai flirtatious glances when they saw him. Seeing this scene, Shanghai couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that he was a little too nervous. Belle was even happier. Compared to Shanghai, he was much more free than Shanghai. If these girls were secretly making eyes at him, then he wouldn't hesitate to ride them. Chapter 484. Excuse me, where are the restaurants in this town? Seeing that the residents of the town didn't seem to be hostile to him, Shanghai thought for a moment, then asked a man who walked past him. Hearing Shanghai's words, the man was obviously stunned for a moment, then a string of words came out of his mouth that Shanghai didn't understand. What do you mean?" Listening to the man's words, Shanghai couldn't help but be a little dumbfounded. "What's going on?" "Boss, he's speaking Spanish." Looking at Shanghai's confused look, Belle next to him couldn't help but laugh. Since Columbus discovered the American continent, for a long time, almost 300 to 400 years, South America was actually the territory of Portugal and Spain. The original indigenous people here had actually been killed by them. The rest were the slaves they had brought over. Most of these people came from Africa. Therefore, there were many countries where the race was almost similar to the black people in Africa. It could be said that they were of the same origin. Cuba, Jamaica, and other countries were all like this. Puerto Rico was also the territory of Spain, and almost all the indigenous people were killed. But later, because of the Spanish-American War, the United States did not have many restrictions and requirements for the colony. Those who had read the history of various countries knew that the Americans only cared about money, and were not too interested in power and status. They belonged to the kind of people who made a lot of money quietly. So before World War I, the Americans had almost no status in the world. At that time, the world's leader was Britain, the leader of the army was France, and the rising place was Germany. The Netherlands was the previous leader, and Spain was the previous leader. The United States had never been the leader. After all, it had just become independent not long ago. But after taking over Puerto Rico, they had to send people over, so they sent a large number of white people. The current generation of Puerto Ricans was indeed very good-looking. They had the physique of black people and the appearance of white people. The Native Americans belonged to the Asian race, so they had the black hair of the Orientals and exquisite facial features. They also had very small pores, unlike the thick pores of white people and the strangely developed bones of black people. It was precisely because of this that Puerto Rico was famous for producing beautiful women. The world's strongest beauty pageant country was Venezuela, but plastic surgery was popular there. The Puerto Ricans could not even afford to eat, so they could not afford plastic surgery. However, they were famous for their good looks, especially the women, who were very popular. They had slender figures, exquisite facial features, and ample bosoms. He had to admit that they were all stunners. One of the more typical beauties was Rosalén Sanchez. She was the foreign agent who had deceived Xing Long when he was acting in Rush Hour 2. She was indeed not bad looking. In the movie, she was even better than the international chapter. The topic was a little off topic. Although Puerto Rico was now bent on joining the United States and becoming the 51st state of the United States, the official language here was still the same as during the Spanish era. The people here mainly spoke Spanish. As for English, there weren't many people who knew it, so Jiang Hai and this person talked for a long time. It was really like a chicken talking to a duck. They fought to a draw. Jiang Hai couldn't understand what he said, and he couldn't understand what Jiang Hai said. In the end, they could only leave it unsettled. After letting this person go, Jiang Hai could only look for someone he knew. The only person who could speak English was the guard captain. When the guard captain saw Jiang Hai looking for him, he was naturally very happy. So he introduced the town to Jiang Hai. Don't look at the small town with only 1,000 people living here. Although Massachusetts is small, it has all the essentials. Not only are there shops, restaurants, hotels, and even bars. This was because sometimes Americans would come here, but they would come by plane. It was the first time they saw someone like Jiang Hai who came by boat. After coming here, Americans would choose to go diving or something like that for fun. The Caribbean Sea was known as the cleanest water in the world. The sea here was really clear, especially in the coral reef area. It was really a sacred place for diving, so many people came here every year to dive. In order to cope with the consumption of these people, the town naturally prepared a lot of things. After Jiang Hai asked, he determined where he wanted to go. He planned to go to the restaurant to eat something first, then consider going to the bar. Of course, the one who mainly wanted to go to the bar was Belle, and Jiang Hai was just there to accompany him. He wasn't interested in these places. After asking for directions, Jiang Hai also gave the guard captain $100. This was a tip, and also a protection fee. With a local bully like him watching over here, Jiang Hai would be more relieved. After receiving Jiang Hai's money, the guard captain was even more enthusiastic, and even personally took Jiang Hai to the town's restaurant. After entering the restaurant, Jiang Hai found that there were really a lot of people in the restaurant. Looking at the food on the table, he found that it was basically fish. After all, they didn't have much land, and they mainly cultivated cocoa. So meat and so on were all imported from the United States, but the imported things were certainly not cheap. Even if the United States didn't have to pay customs duties here, the transportation cost was certainly, so the beef here was very expensive. Basically, not many people could afford to eat it. Their main food was fish. Sometimes, they would only have chicken for a change. After Jiang Hai and Belle entered the restaurant, they really attracted almost everyone's attention. They didn't care and just sat at an empty table in the restaurant. Not long after, a Puerto Rican girl came over and asked Jiang Hai in slightly unfamiliar English, "What would you like to eat? Is there no menu?" Understanding her words, Jiang Hai was a little surprised because he didn't know what to eat. There are only 4 ways to cook here: boiled, roasted, stewed, and fried. You have to choose what you want to eat first, and then tell us what you want to eat. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, it was obvious that this wasn't the first time the girl met such a customer, so she just shrugged and said to them helplessly, What raw materials do you have here?" Hearing what the girl said, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be speechless, then asked, "Only chicken and fish." After listening to Jiang Hai's words, the girl pointed directly to the wall. She knew that Jiang Hai would definitely ask what kind of fish she wanted, so it was better to let him see it himself. Sure enough, following the girl's pointed finger, Jiang Hai also looked at the wall. At this time, he found that there was a painting on the wall at this time. There were many fish drawn on the painting, divided into 3 columns and 4 parts. In fact, this painting was posted in all restaurants, hotels, and brothels throughout the Caribbean. This is a unified fish sales list in the Caribbean. Of course, it refers not to the price, but to the type. It is divided into 4 parts. 1 part is recommended to eat fish, 1 part is edible fish, 1 part is not recommended to eat fish, and 1 part is not edible fish. In a restaurant like this, only the first 2 columns of fish are available. Jiang Hai looked at it. The fish on the painting, in addition to a cartoon image, was accompanied by an English word. It seems that this was prepared for people like them. To be honest, Jiang Hai has been in the fishery for almost a year. Basically, he can recognize most of the fish in his fishery, but there are many fish on the painting that he doesn't know. He doesn't know, so Belle is even more ridiculous. The first recommended fish is lionfish, lionfish. This fish is also called cobras. It was originally a fish that didn't exist in the Caribbean. The reason why it appeared here is because there was a typhoon that blew up an aquarium in Miami. The ancestors of these fish came here in the typhoon. After settling down here, the lionfish's fighting prowess wasn't bad, and the spikes on its body were poisonous. Therefore, other than sharks, this kind of fish was not afraid of any other fish. However, sharks were limited, so this kind of fish was like the hare in Australia. It was now a scourge here. All the shops recommended eating this kind of fish. Diving tourists could also catch this kind of fish to feed the sharks. It seemed that these people were quite helpless. Below lionfish, the second type of fish is called Cero in English. According to this name, you can't find it on Google. This fish is called mackerel, also known as big mackerel. The fish below this fish is called kingfish. According to the translation, it is the kingfish, but in fact, it is not. This fish is called king mackerel, also a type of mackerel, but it is very big. The fish outside was called Spanish mackerel. It looked like a very high-end fish, but in fact, it was also available in the country, and it was very cheap. Spanish mackerel. People who lived near Lien City knew this fish. Spanish mackerel dumplings were quite famous. But here, this fish is much bigger than the fish in China. Compared with the fish here, the domestic mackerel is just a fry. The fish behind is called wahoo. The fish behind is called trevallies. This fish is translated as devil fish, but it is actually called trevallies here. It is also a fish. The most famous one is trevallies. It is very big, but it tastes average. After trevallies, there is a fish that Jiang Hai doesn't know. It is called mahi-mahi. This fish is also very strange. It is the first time that Jiang Hai has seen it. The two fish below this fish are yellowtail snapper. This fish is called yellow snapper. Jiang Hai knows about yellow snapper. There are some in his manor, but he has never seen yellow snapper. The name behind this type of fish is tuna, which means tuna. In Hong Kong, this type of fish is called tuna fish. But in China, when it is translated into Mandarin, it is called tuna fish. Finally, the recommended food is squid. This is all the recommended food fish. Chapter 485. After the recommended edible fish, there are edible fish. The first one is lobster, which is lobster. Originally, there were quite a lot of lobsters in the Caribbean. Of course, there are still a lot of lobsters now. However, after eating lobsters for so many years, there are very few lobsters near the coast. If you want to catch lobsters, you have to go farther. The second edible is conch, which means conch. Below the conch is barracuda, which Jiang Hai knows. It's barracuda, which is a barracuda. This fish swims very fast and is also known as sea wolf. It tastes very good, but there aren't many in his fish farm. Below is de gsnappr, which is a snapper, similar to the yellow snapper above. Below is muttionsnappr, which is also a snapper, but it is a two-color snapper, which is rarer. There are also three edible fish, which are dppsnappr, redhindgrupr, and rockindgrupr, which are all the edible fish. The best ones not to eat are all kinds of groupers except for the above two. There is also a snapper called coral, which Jiang Hai has never seen before. There is also parrotfish, rippled-lipped fish. No one may know this name, but generally, people who have read fishery novels will not be unfamiliar with this name, humphead wrasse, which is the official name of humphead wrasse. In addition to triggerfish, parrotfish, also known as parrotfish, is also a protected species here. These four fish are the best ones not to eat, and the things that must not be eaten are sharks and turtles. In the Caribbean, this paper is posted in every shop. Of course, if you catch these things in the sea and no one cares about you, and you take it to the restaurant to cook, they may call the police. Speaking of these fish, Jiang Hai has seen some and some have not, but anyway, he has some impressions of most of the fish in his mind. But what the hell is this mahi-mahi? He really wants to try it. Give me one of these. After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he pointed to the fish. Huh? Are you sure? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the waiter looked at Jiang Hai in surprise. Sure. Hearing the waiter's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. This person is still afraid that I can't pay. If I were you, I wouldn't order something so exaggerated. Just as Jiang Hai finished his confirmation, a female voice came from the table next to him. Jiang Hai and Belle Lester looked over, and Belle's eyes lit up. There were a total of 4 people at the table who spoke. They were all girls, and they didn't look very old. They were wearing very light but conservative clothes. They had bronze skin, big eyes, slender legs, full, big eyes, and exquisite facial features. Although they looked slightly different, their Latin style was very strong. The one who spoke was the prettiest girl among Jiang Hai and the others at that table. Hey beauty, why? Hearing her words, Belle Lester asked her with a smile. At the same time, his eyes drifted there. No reason, the fish you ordered is called loach. As far as I know, there are only 3 of these fish in their store. Every day, they are mature, that is to say, they are more than 1 meter and weigh 30 kilograms. Are you sure you can eat it? Hearing Belle's words, the girl turned her head and looked at Belle and Jiang Hai with a playful look on her face. Hearing her words, Belle and Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. This was indeed something they didn't consider. Then give me half. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said to the waiter who was still waiting next to him. Half a fish is about 15 kilograms. Don't forget, although only Jiang Hai and Belle came down to eat, there are still 4 people on the boat. However, there were still 4 people on the ship. They still had to pack some for them to eat. They couldn't possibly eat it all by themselves. Since Jiang Hai and the others already know how big the fish is and they want half, the waiter didn't say anything and directly left. When he came back again, he gave Jiang Hai and the others 2 glasses of orange juice. There should be quite a lot of orange juice here. Hey beauty, hello, my name is Belle Lester, can we get to know each other? While waiting for the food to be served, Jiang Hai took out his mobile phone and searched for information about Loach. Belle turned his head and looked at the beauties over there and asked. I know you, American. You came down from the big ship in the port. I have always heard that Americans have always been very indulgent in their private lives. Now it seems that this is true. Hearing his words, the girl who just spoke couldn't help but glance at him, then she put a piece of fish into her mouth with a fork and said slowly. Hey, this is your misunderstanding of us. In fact, we are very loyal. Hearing the girl's words, Belle pretended to be hurt and then slowly said. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. This guy still has the nerve to say that he is loyal? In Jiang Hai's view, the most loyal person in the entire manor is Philip. Except for him, the other men are all bad, including Tommy Char, Eleanor Cece, and Andrew Christian. These guys have gone out to play after their wives went to work in town. Jiang Hai didn't go with them because he didn't like the fast food they went to find. The most aggressive one should be Belle Lester. According to Robbins Garcia, this guy is quite popular in bars, nightclubs, and some brothels. He said that he is a special forces soldier from the Triangular State, and that he once fought against terrorists and showed off his muscles. Then, the young doctors and nurses all looked at him in a new light. Some of them even went out to have fun. After they were done, the woman did not even take his money. This made Robbins Garcia and the others envious. This time, he definitely didn't have any thoughts about the women on the ship. He didn't dare to have any thoughts about Jiang Hai. But when he reached the shore and got off the land, he went out to play many times. Hey, I have already introduced myself. I can't keep calling you Beauty 1, Beauty 2, Beauty 3, and Beauty 4. Out of courtesy, you should also introduce yourselves. After saying a few more words, Belle said to the 4 beauties in front of him with a smile, while raising his eyebrows. It has to be said that Belle is indeed a master of flirting. When he said this, the 4 girls opposite him all laughed. Hey, don't you care about your little brother? But the girl who just spoke knocked on the table and said to Jiang Hai, who was playing with his mobile phone in the distance. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little surprised, because he seems to be more like Belle's follower. How do you know that he is my little brother? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai looked at his and Belle's clothes. The clothes of the 2 are actually similar. None of the workers in Jiang Hai's manor is short of money. Jiang Hai gives more wages and bonuses. Because of this, the clothes that they usually buy were also very good. Because they worked in the manor, Jiang Hai and the others had to wear outdoor clothes. Because of this, Jiang Hai's and Belle's clothes weren't much different. Jiang Hai also didn't wear his gold watch. How did this girl know that he and Belle had a relationship? It mainly depends on the temperament. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl couldn't help but smile and said, while Belle shrugged helplessly. Then I have to thank you. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai can't help but feel a little dumbfounded. What is this called? You're welcome, sir. Hello, my name is Kevin Carter. This is my English name, Spanish. I guess you're not interested in hearing it. I heard that you are here to fish for tuna. I think you may need a guide. What do you think of me? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl stood up directly and walked to Jiang Hai and Belle's table, then sat directly next to Jiang Hai and said to Jiang Hai. You? To be honest, if this girl came and said, I heard that you need a prostitute, what do you think of me? Jiang Hai would say, not bad. Bronze skin, a fit body, a good face, and a pair of long gun stands. Jiang Hai likes her very much, but the problem is, she is talking about a guide. Her? What kind of guide? And most importantly, her name, Kevin Carter? What the hell? Isn't this a man's name? I heard that there are a lot of people in Brazil. Could it be that there are also people in Puerto Rico? Don't underestimate me. I am a native here. I have lived here for 18 years. When I was 13 years old, I followed my father to make a living on the sea. I don't think I am worse than those fishermen. Our school is on holiday now, so we need to find a job to earn some money. Looking at Jiang Hai, the girl didn't understand the meaning behind Jiang Hai's eyes. She just thought that Jiang Hai didn't trust her, so she said firmly. Let me ask a question first. Are you a man or a woman? After hesitating, Jiang Hai decided to ask clearly. Of course I am a woman, you can't be. I'm just a guide, okay? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl couldn't help but take a step back. Then she looked at Jiang Hai with some vigilance. Does this guy have any bad intentions towards me? Cough, I am not interested in you. It's just the name Kevin Carter. Hee, it seems to be a boy's name. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled and gestured. Belle also shrugged. It was indeed a boy's name. What? It's a boy's name? Oh my God. Paulo, you bastard. The girl was stunned when she heard Jiang Hai's words. Then she turned her head and yelled at the other girl sitting next to her. It seemed that she was the one who came up with the name. Chapter 486. Hey, you haven't said if you want us or not. After playing around for a while, the girl named Kevin Carter came over and looked at Jiang Hai with some anger. Because of the play just now, the girl's face couldn't help sweating a little. Because her skin color is a little dark, even if she blushes, Jiang Hai can't see it. You? Didn't you just say yourself? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment and said to her. I thought about it, if there is such a good yacht to sit on, it wouldn't be good if I don't take them, so I decided to take them, but they don't need money, even if it's just for a ride, I'll be the only one making money. How about it? If you miss this opportunity, there won't be another one. Looking at Jiang Hai, Kevin Carter said with a serious face, as if Jiang Hai really took a big advantage. Looking at her, Jiang Hai smiled. These girls are really funny. Hey, little beauty, don't tell me you like our boss? It's right to like him, young, rich, and handsome, TSK. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't speak, Belle Lester couldn't help but tease Kevin Carter. Like him? How is that possible? Glancing at Belle with disdain, Kevin said with a look of displeasure. Since you don't like our boss, then you must like me if you want to get on our boat. Speaking of this, Belle deliberately wiped his hair and said in a showy manner. Then I like him. But unfortunately, Kevin didn't give him a chance to be narcissistic and turned her head and said directly. Thank you. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. It's actually good to attack this Belle. Hey, if you don't like me, and you don't like our boss, then why do we have to use you? Hearing her words, Bale was a little annoyed. He slammed the table and said to her, Don't worry. What? Even as a tour guide, there are still unspoken rules. Perhaps once you Americans reveal your identity, there will be plenty of women who want to accompany you because they want the money in your pockets. However, we don't care about your pocket money. If you really want us to accompany you, it's not impossible. Bring us to America, bring us, and we'll accompany you. After Kevin finished speaking, his originally playful gaze instantly brightened. If these people could really take him to America, then there was nothing wrong with accompanying them. However, when he heard his words, Jiang Hai chuckled. He wasn't that interested in these things that had a price tag. Forget it. I don't want to take you to the United States for the time being. However, if you want to be a guide, I can consider it. Tell me your price. Jiang Hai gently knocked on the table, attracting everyone's attention, and then asked. When they heard Jiang Hai's words, the guests at other tables in this restaurant couldn't help but sigh. Everyone knows that it's a good job to be a guide for these Americans. Not only can they sit on a big boat, but they also have good food to eat. The most important thing is that these Americans are very generous, especially this young man. He can drive such a good yacht here, which proves that this guy is not short of money. However, they still opened their mouths too late, and these little girls snatched the business away. I just said, even if the three of them go out to play, I only charge $50. Looking at Jiang Hai, Kevin said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai touched his chin. $50? That's not expensive or cheap. However, Jiang Hai didn't care. He came out to fish for tuna for nothing more than to have fun. Since she can come and help, Jiang Hai didn't care. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai nodded and then said, I can give you $50, but there's a problem. I don't know if you're bluffing me or not. If the place you take us to tomorrow has a good harvest, not to mention $50, even $100 is fine. But if we're not satisfied, then I don't want $50. Kevin waved her hand. In fact, this matter didn't have any loss for her. After all, even if she didn't spend money, it was a very good deal for her to go on a trip on the boat. After all, they had nothing to do. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was too lazy to argue with this little girl. He smiled and nodded in agreement. I'll look for you on your boat at 6:00 tomorrow morning. Remember to get up early, or you won't be able to catch a big fish. Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed, the girl immediately smiled and responded. After making a face at the three girls at the table next to her, she slapped a few dollars on the table, which was the money they had to pay for the meal, and then quickly ran away. Looking at the appearance of these girls, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He was happy to help others. Boss? Do you like them? Seeing Jiang Hai's smile, Belle said with a sly smile. Like your head. Jiang Hai gave the guy with a crooked smile a middle finger and continued to sit there and wait. Not long after, half of the fish was served. Just as the waiter said, most of the food here could only be eaten in 4 ways. This half of the fish wasn't small, so they also cooked it in 4 ways: stewed, roasted, boiled, and fried. Although it looked very strange, the taste was still acceptable except for the fishy smell. Puerto Rico's way of eating is a mix of South America and the United States. Americans eat sweet and sour, while South Americans eat sweet and spicy. So these 3 fish were almost all sour, sweet, and spicy. Although the taste was a bit strange, it had a different flavor. After eating a little, they packed up the rest. These were to be taken back to the boat for Azalina and the others. After eating, they didn't immediately return to the boat. Instead, they strolled around the town because they still had a lot of things to buy. The captain of the guard said that oil could be added at the dock, but they still had to prepare other things. For example, fresh water, some famous fruits, cocoa, and some beer. Because sailing at sea was very boring, the consumption of these things was not small because there was really nothing to do. There was no internet or Wi-Fi at sea. Jiang Hai had a satellite TV, but he could only watch it. When there was nothing to do, it was a good choice to drink a little at sea, so Jiang Hai and the others consumed a lot of alcohol. This time, they naturally consumed a lot of alcohol in Puerto Rico. So after shopping around, they came to the only bar in the town. As soon as they walked in, they heard a lot of noise coming from inside. Of course, this noise didn't come from the music, but from the guests in the bar. When Jiang Hai and Belle walked in, many people saw them, but unlike the people in the restaurant, who were full of curiosity, the people here continued to talk loudly after glancing at Jiang Hai and the others. Glancing around the bar, the environment of this bar was not very good. Many men were crowded in this small bar, either bragging or flirting with girls. The smell of alcohol mixed with the smell of sweat became the main theme in this small space. Among these people, there were many young girls squeezed among these men. They didn't care about the smell of these men. Instead, they thought it was the smell of men. If they took a fancy to one, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't go home at night. This was a Western bar, and Jiang Hai was not interested in it. However, looking at the bar, everything was quite complete, so after Jiang Hai entered, he sat directly in front of the bar. What do you want? Looking at Jiang Hai sitting here, the bartender, who was mixing drinks, asked Jiang Hai in curly English. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai understood what he meant. 2 glasses of the best wine you have here. Jiang Hai looked at the man, smiled, took out a grant, $50, and stuffed it into the wine glass next to him. He had already seen the sign hanging behind the bartender. The best wine only cost $12 a glass. Jiang Hai gave more as his tip. Seeing this, the man couldn't help but laugh and immediately began to mix the drinks. Hey, boss, the girls here are so hot. At this time, Belle also patrolled around, sat next to Jiang Hai, and said excitedly. Along the way, this guy can be regarded as the little prince of the nightclub. His recognition was not ordinary. No matter how hot you are, you should pay attention to it. Don't cause trouble. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai knew that this guy was not going to go back to the boat at night, but it didn't matter. With his skills, Jiang Hai was not worried that he would suffer. Don't worry, boss. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle also knew that Jiang Hai allowed him to take a break. His eyes lit up instantly. At this time, the bartender just finished mixing 2 glasses of wine and placed them on the bar. Belle took one with a smile and rushed towards the group of girls in the distance. Looking at the girls over there, he exclaimed in surprise, "Wow, beauties, are you playing Do Diju?" Do Diju was taught by Jiang Hai to Delina and the others, and they somehow passed it to Robbins Garcia and the others. Then, everyone in his manner learned it. But at this time, it was obvious that Do Diju had not spread to Puerto Rico yet. Wow, I'm very interested in what you're playing. Can you teach me, please? Hearing that they were not playing Do Diju, Belle's face flashed a trace of embarrassment. Of course, this trace of embarrassment was definitely faked by him. Stupid, how could the 5 of them play Do Diju together? But this guy was really good at acting. He took the opportunity to pretend to be pitiful. Seeing that this handsome blonde American was so interested in their game, these girls also pulled him in. Chapter 487. Listening to Belle's flirting skills, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curl his lips. He really didn't care. Although Jiang Hai is a casual person, under normal circumstances, he won't be too casual, especially when the situation is not very clear, so he just looked at the people in the distance who are fighting, then picked up the wine in front of him and took a sip. Brother, what good wine do you have here? Looking at the bartender who is still playing with the glasses, Jiang Hai asked him. Beer or white wine? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the bartender looked at him and asked. For Jiang Hai, a customer who is willing to spend money, his attitude is very good, and his face is smiling. Of course, the white wine in his mouth is not the white wine in China, but the foreign wine. Either is fine, I'll ask first. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai shrugged and said to him. Beer is mainly bottled Corona and Buhamer, and we also have homemade beer, and it's very cheap, but I advise you not to try it, because you may not be used to it. As for white wine, we mainly sell rum here. If you want, the quality of this thing is quite good. Looking at Jiang Hai, the bartender here said seriously. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also touched his chin. He has heard of Corona and Buhamer before. But he really hasn't tasted them before. He remembered that he saw a post on the internet, mainly introducing the top 10 best-selling beers in the world. Among them, the most powerful is Wuxia's Snow, which has been ranked first in the world for many years. Of course, the main sales target is the Chinese. In foreign countries, especially in the Western world, almost no one knows what kind of beer Snow is, and few people have drunk it. Everyone agrees that the best-selling beer in the world is Budweiser light beer, which is also rare in China. Because it is a very light beer, and there is a clear lemon flavor. It is more like a cocktail than a beer, but it has the taste of beer. The 8% concentration is very good, and it is somewhat similar to the fruit beer in China. Jiang Hai also likes this beer. He bought this beer when he was in the United States. In third place was the normal Budweiser beer, and in fourth place was Corona beer. The origin of this beer was Mexico. It tasted similar to light beer, but the concentration was slightly higher. If anyone could drink light beer, then this wine would make people unknowingly drink too much. However, this beer brand was later acquired by Budweiser. Currently, it was mainly sold in the American market, especially in the southern part of the country. Ranked 5th is Shirao beer. This beer is not a major brand in the US, UK, or Wuxia. Few people had seen this beer. Its main markets were Africa and South America, but it was not available in Puerto Rico either. In 6th place was Heineken. There was no need to introduce them further. In 7th place was Silver Bullet. Not many people knew about this brand, but their sales in the US were the second highest in China. Currently, they had not expanded overseas, so not many people knew about them. In 8th place was Merlot beer, and in 9th place was Biyao beer. Their main market was South America, and their biggest market was Brazil. During the World Cup last year, this beer was really popular for a while. The beer in 10th place was called Asahi beer. Needless to say, this name represented its main market and origin, Japan. So now that he heard the bartender's words, Jiang Hai was really interested. Give me a glass of each of the 3 beers you mentioned, and give me a glass of rum. Jiang Hai looked at the bartender in front of him and smiled. The bartender's reaction was not slow. After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he had already poured a glass of each beer for Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai drank the locally brewed beer first. But when it was imported, Jiang Hai almost spat it out. It tastes terrible, right? There's nothing we can do about it. We lack fresh water here, and we even have to import it from overseas. Everyone's daily consumption of fresh water is limited, so the water used to brew this beer is evaporated from the ocean. It's no wonder it tastes good. If it weren't for the fact that this beer is cheap, we wouldn't drink it. The bartender looked at Jiang Hai and smiled as he explained. Puerto Rico is a country with a poor economy. They had declared bankruptcy in 2012, which was why they wanted to join the United States so badly. But the US is a group of tycoons, and they will not agree if there are no benefits. Puerto Rico had no specialties, and it was not a strategic location. Third, the only influential voting rights, customs, and defense in the world were all in the hands of the United States. They did not need this country to become their 51st state, because it would not create any wealth for them. Moreover, there would be an additional 1.8 million unemployed people. What would happen to Social Security then? What about medical insurance? What about the residents? Just the government's expenses are a huge sum of money, and the US does not have much ambition for their country. They were not like the Russians. They only cared about money. If they were willing, North America would have already belonged to the Americans. Canada and Mexico are not a problem. Maybe they have fought all the way to South America, and they do not have any concept of glory. Okay. After wiping his mouth, Jiang Hai put the glass of beer on the table, then picked up the 2 bottles and drank. He took a sip of Corona, and it was not bad. It was similar to light beer, but the alcohol content was slightly higher. This is not bad. The taste of Bahamas is very strong. It is not a light beer, but an ordinary beer. Jiang Hai put it down after 2 sips. Then he tasted the rum, which made his eyebrows twitch. It was said that South America was the country of rum. Jiang Hai took a sip and felt that it was really good. South American rum was mostly brewed with sugar cane, so it had a sweet taste in its own body. When it is drunk, it is not so strong, and it is not as spicy as American rum or vodka. Instead, it is delicious when it is drunk, and it explodes in the stomach, making the body feel warm. This is quite to Jiang Hai's taste, so he looked at the bartender and took out a few $100s from his pocket. Give me 3 boxes of Corona, and 10 bottles of this rum, Jiang Hai said to the bartender in front of him with a smile. That's $315 in total. I'll charge you $300. Hearing that Jiang Hai wanted to buy so much, the bartender laughed. Then Jiang Hai took out 3 francs and slapped them on the table. The other waiters had already brought the wine out. Of course, they also had to help carry the wine to the side of the boat. For this, Jiang Hai gave the young man a tip of $5. Fei carried 2 boxes of wine, and Jiang Hai carried 1 box of wine, 10 bottles of rum, the things they bought, and dinner. The two of them came to the side of his boat. As for Belle, let him go crazy here. He probably won't cause trouble. After delivering the things to the place, Jiang Hai also gave the waiter $5 and let him leave. Jiang Hai called down Harem and Ferns, and the two of them carried the things up. At this time, the 4 people on the boat had already eaten dinner, but they were still quite interested in the local specialties that Jiang Hai brought back. They were quite happy after eating. They played here until around 10 o'clock, before Jiang Hai drove them back to their rooms to sleep. He also went to sleep. He didn't forget that the girl named Kevin said that they would come over at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. It was a quiet night. Although Belle was a little wild, he didn't stay overnight and came back around midnight. After Jiang Hai knew that he was back, he slept even more soundly. When the sun slowly rose from the sea level the next day, Jiang Hai also woke up from his sleep. Walking out of the room, the sea breeze outside blew, and Jiang Hai instantly woke up a lot. Because he had lived by the sea for so long, Jiang Hai was also very familiar with the big temperature difference by the sea. The 2 places with the biggest temperature difference in the world were the desert and the sea. In the desert, because the sand didn't absorb heat, it reflected heat during the day, so the temperature in the desert was very high. However, at night, because the sand didn't absorb heat during the day, there was no sun at night, and no heat was emitted, so it was very cold. The sea was similar to the desert, and the temperature difference was also quite big. Getting up in the morning, even Jiang Hai couldn't help but have goosebumps all over his body. Fortunately, he was prepared and put on his coat. Looking at the foggy sea in the distance, Jiang Hai walked to the plate armor. After adapting for a while, he began to move. By the time he finished his activities at 5:50, the fog on the surface of the sea has almost dissipated. It seems that today's weather is good. The sun shines on the sea, making the sea clear. Even Jiang Hai's boat has a lot of small fishes. "Hey, handsome, you're so early." Just as Jiang Hai was about to move and wake everyone up, a bell-like voice rang out. Then Jiang Hai looked over and saw the girl named Kevin, who he met last night. She was walking over with 4 other girls. The 4 girls were wearing the same clothes as last night. However, each of them was carrying a small bag. Seeing Jiang Hai standing there, they waved their hands vigorously. "Come on up." Seeing the arrival of the 4 girls, Jiang Hai also waved to them and put down the stairs on the boat. Not long after, the girls climbed onto Jiang Hai's boat. Looking at the luxurious yacht in front of them, their eyes couldn't help but be particularly bright. Speaking of which, these girls were playing on such a beautiful yacht for the first time. Looking at the bright eyes of these girls, Jiang Hai smiled and said to them, "You can rest in the living room first. You can watch TV here. I'll wake my people up and then make breakfast. We'll go after eating." Chapter 488. Whatever you say, boss. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl named Kevin from yesterday also said excitedly. When Jiang Hai went to the cabin to call them, these girls were also very bold, regardless of whether Jiang Hai is a bad guy or not. They just sat directly on the sofa of Jiang Hai's yacht, feeling the touch of the leather sofa under their buttocks. It really made them extremely excited. They have never been to such a good place before. Just as they were touching here and there and looking around curiously, Jiang Hai had also called Delina and the others. After everyone got up, they first went to wash their faces and brush their teeth, then Delina and Marian went to help Jiang Hai make breakfast. As for Belle, Azalina, and Harriman also came to the living room. When Belle saw these girls, his eyes narrowed and he greeted them with a smile. Unfortunately, these girls were not very interested in Belle. Only one of them smiled and nodded to him as a greeting. The other 3 girls directly ignored him and whispered to each other. Not long after, Jiang Hai and the others came out with a large pot of soup. This is the first dish Jiang Hai learned to make after coming to the United States, besides frying steak, cheddar soup. Speaking of this soup, it is a very famous food in the Boston area. This thing is traditionally called New England clam cheddar soup, but after coming to Boston, you can actually put anything you want in it. Even if you want to put lobsters, crabs, and other things in it, you can put them in. Jiang Hai put some big shrimps this time. Compared to clams, he prefers to eat these things. Of course, there are also chopped abalone, sea cucumber slices, and some clam meat in it. Of course, there are also dough balls in it. If you just drink the steam, you won't be full. This is the first time Kevin and the others drank this kind of soup. After drinking it, they couldn't help but give Jiang Hai a thumbs up. It really tastes good. After all, Jiang Hai's products are all things he brought from his manor. We're full, so we're about to set off. Tell me, where should we go? Not long after, the meal was almost finished. Kevin's 3 companions were still very conscious. They knew that after eating Jiang Hai's food, it was necessary to help clean up. So after everyone finished eating, they carried their bowls into the kitchen, and Jiang Hai asked Kevin, "What is it?" "That depends on what you want to catch. If you want to catch tuna, you have to drive east. If you want to catch lobsters, you have to drive southeast." Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kevin stood up, picked up his phone, and zoomed in on the screen. Then, he told Jiang Hai about it. It seems that she really knows the environment here very well. According to her, different fish go to different waters. The barracuda had to go to the northeast, and the tuna had to go to the east because the sea there was deeper and there were more tuna. Not only were there ordinary tuna, but there were also many bluefin and yellowfin tuna. However, there was a problem. If they caught these fish, it would be troublesome to sell them. Although there were people who collected fish in Puerto Rico, the price was not high. If you want to sell them at a high price, you have to go back to Miami to sell them. The price difference is about 20%. Jiang Hai doesn't care about this, because this is not his main purpose. If he really catches a rare fish, then he can also chill the fish or freeze it directly. Of course, the price will be reduced if he freezes it. However, Jiang Hai doesn't care about the small amount of money. He has enough bluefin tuna in his fishing farm. He came here to have fun. After confirming that he caught tuna, Jiang Hai also started the engine. After Belle went to the shore to untie the rope, he quickly rushed back to the boat. Then, the boat rushed to the east as Kevin said. With the departure of the ship, the fog on the surface of the sea completely dispersed. The warm sunlight shone on the sea. The sea absorbed a small amount of heat, but most of it was reflected into the air, causing the temperature of the sea to rise rapidly. At 8:30 a.m., the temperature outside had already reached 20 degrees Celsius. Seeing this, Kevin and the other girls couldn't sit still in the living room anymore. Therefore, they directly took off their jackets and trousers in front of Delina, Marion, Azaviel, Harriman and Belle. In a split second, they had already put on a set of bikini swimsuits. Are you going out to swim? The boat is still sailing. Looking at them, Delina felt that it was necessary to remind these girls who were about the same age as her. Of course not. Although the weather outside is hot, the sea water is still very cold. We are preparing to go fishing. We took off our clothes because it would be troublesome if we accidentally fell into the sea or got scratched. Hearing Delina's words, Kevin also smiled and said with a serious expression on his face. Fishing? Okay, I'll call Jiang. Hearing that they were going to start fishing, Delina was stunned for a moment. Then, she ran to the captain's cabin to call Jiang Hai. To be honest, Jiang Hai was also interested in fishing. After setting the coordinates and letting the boat sail automatically, Jiang Hai took his fishing equipment and walked out of the cabin. Although Jiang Hai hadn't fished for tuna before, Edward Anderson and the other old sailors were experts in fishing for tuna. Therefore, they have already prepared everything for Jiang Hai to fish for tuna. For example, there are 5 or 6 poles with thick fishing lines and bait that tuna likes. Now the boat is still sailing, although the speed is not particularly fast. However, it was impossible to use 5 or 6 fishing rods directly, so Jiang Hai could only use one fishing rod. However, Jiang Hai wasn't very clear about what he was going to catch. He just walked out with a fishing rod. "Hey, boss, what are you doing?" Seeing Jiang Hai walking out with a long fishing rod, Kevin and the others who had climbed onto the platform at this time couldn't help but ask strangely. Didn't you say that you were going to fish?" "I'm here to join in the fun." Hearing their words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be speechless. What do they mean? Do they mean that they don't want me to join in the fun? It really makes him a little embarrassed. The boat hasn't stopped yet. How can you catch anything with this fishing rod? Is there any other seaweed? We are fishing for some bait now. You see, we all use this. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kevin couldn't help but laugh. Then he opened his small bag and took out a lot of bundles of lines from it. These lines are fishing lines, but they are very thick and have at least 50 or 60 pounds of tension. Generally, this kind of line is not very common in sea fishing. On the heads of these lines, there are a few big fish hooks tied with some silk threads and lead. What's going on? Jiang Hai has seen fake bait before. But at least, no matter how fake the bait is, it should at least look like a small fish or a worm. What the hell is this colorful line? As if seeing the doubts in Jiang Hai's eyes, Kevin also explained. Here, we use this thing to fish. The fish caught with this thing is the bait, and then we use this bait to catch the big fish. Hearing her explanation, Jiang Hai was even more confused. What's going on? Facts speak louder than words. Looking at Jiang Hai's confused look, Kevin and the others didn't care. They just smiled and tied the end of the rope to a fixed place on the floating platform. Then they threw the money into the sea and didn't care about it anymore. Looking at their appearance, Jiang Hai held the fishing rod and didn't know whether to move forward or retreat. It was quite awkward. But soon, he was not embarrassed anymore. Just as he was about to take the fishing rod back, a girl who was with Kevin suddenly laughed and shouted, then began to pull a fishing line back. Seeing her actions, not only Jiang Hai, but everyone else on the boat looked at her in surprise. She took the bait? Yes, she took the bait. As the girl pulled hard, a small fish about 20 centimeters long was pulled to the shore by her. Looking at this fish, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be taken aback, because this fish is not someone else. Although it is very small, Jiang Hai can recognize that this is a tuna, but it is not an expensive species. Now it is pulled to the platform, it is still moving there. Wow, it's really a fish. You guys are amazing. Are we going to eat this for lunch today? Looking at the tuna they caught, Delina and Marian also ran down and asked them with envy. Of course not. Of course not. Look at this fish, it's called Little Letany. Look at the tire pattern on both sides of it. This fish can't be eaten. This kind of tuna doesn't grow big and its meat is very old. It tastes like a cooked tire. This is the bait for us to catch the big fish later. Hearing Delina's words, Kevin explained to her with a smile. Hearing her words, Delina was also very excited. Seeing their eager look, the girls here took the initiative to take out 4 fishing lines for them. After taking the fishing lines in their hands, Delina and Marian also sat on the floating platform. After learning from these girls, they fixed the fishing line on the floating platform and pulled it from time to time. Then they also chatted with each other. After all, these girls are about the same age, so they still have some common topics to talk about. As for Jiang Hai, after seeing that they can really catch a fish, he was already a little ashamed. He smiled awkwardly and took the fishing rod back to the cabin. It's better for him to sail the boat. As for Delina and Marian, with Azalina watching over them, nothing will happen. But at the same time, Jiang Hai also made a decision in his heart. It seems that fishing like this is quite interesting. After these little girls get off the boat, when he has time, he will also try it out. Without a fishing rod, without a bait, can he really catch fish? It's wonderful to think about it. Chapter 489. Wow, another one, another one. As another small tuna was pulled up, Daliana exclaimed excitedly. Hearing her voice, the girls around her also smiled kindly. Good job. At this time, a girl sitting next to her who came with Kevin said to Daliana in very stiff English. Hearing her words, Daliana also smiled. They had been fishing here for almost half an hour. Because they didn't need to check whether the bait was still there or not, after all, the silk thread wouldn't disappear. They just needed to pull it from time to time to see if the pulling force was right. If the pulling force was right, they would directly pull it up, and there was a high chance that they would catch a fish. Although only half an hour had passed, at this time, there were already a lot of fish in the fish trough behind these girls. Of course, they were all small tunas. The speed of the boat wasn't fast, but it wasn't slow either. Most of the fish couldn't catch up with the boat, but tunas were the fastest fish in the ocean, so it wasn't troublesome for them to catch up with the boat. It was precisely because of this that the fish they caught were basically small tunas. In addition, there was only a small octopus, which was probably hung on the hook and was pulled up. Young people always made friends quickly. In this half an hour, Kevin, Daliana, and Marian had basically become good friends. They also knew some of their situation. For example, they weren't Jiang Hai's women, but Jiang Hai's daughters. They lived in Boston, but didn't go to school. They also knew the situation of Kevin and Marian. These 4 girls were from a small town. Except for Kevin, they also knew the names of the other 3 girls. However, these 3 girls didn't speak too often. This was because their English was similar to the English of ordinary students in Wuxia. It was written in English, which was very troublesome to speak. Therefore, they spoke very slowly, and sometimes it was easy to get the meaning wrong. However, Daliana didn't care about it. No matter what it was, as long as they could speak it, it would be enough. As for why Kevin's English was so good, it was because her cousin had emigrated to the United States. That family was quite impressive. When she returned to China, she never spoke Spanish. She only spoke English, but it also helped her practice her spoken English. Kevin's English was quite famous in the small town. It was precisely because of her good English that it was not difficult for Kevin to find a job in Puerto Rico. They were now studying in high school in Puerto Rico. However, they would graduate in a year. After graduation, these girls would have to look for jobs. They wouldn't consider going to college. Besides, there weren't any good universities in Puerto Rico. Unless Puerto Rico could join the United States next year, but that was also impossible, and they knew it very well. Wow, it's really hard to imagine that that guy is actually your father. I'll say something that might cause you to misunderstand. I really thought that he found you. Hee, you know, but how could he adopt you? You should know that the 2 of you are not that far apart. He is also a young man with that kind of ability. Aren't you afraid of being taken advantage of if you live with him? After watching Daliana take the fish and throw the fishing line back into the sea, Kevin asked strangely. I've seen some cartoons and movies before. They always say that single men or women who adopt children have some ulterior motives. At this moment, a girl next to her also whispered. Ulterior motives. Hee, I know what you're talking about, but Jiang is not that kind of person. Don't worry, if he wanted us, he would have done it a long time ago. We don't hate him. If he needed us, we would have given it to him a long time ago. Daliana didn't care about Kevin and her companion's questions. After a chuckle, she began to explain. What she said was also the truth. Although she still didn't understand what dependence, what worship, what liking, and what love was, deep in her heart, she didn't feel disgusted doing some shameful things with Jiang Hai. Huh. Americans are really. Okay, forget we said anything, but why don't you go to school? You can make a lot of friends if you go to school. Looking at the slightly addicted eyes of Daliana and Marian, Kevin shrugged and wisely changed the topic. However, This topic was obviously not something that Daliana could talk about because it involves a secret. According to the place marked by Kevin, Jiang Hai's ship sailed for about an hour and arrived at the sea area. At the same time, Jiang Hai also took out the map in his mobile phone and took a look. The map he took was naturally the location of those shipwrecks. This tuna spot was about 5 nautical miles away from the location of the shipwrecks. The place was really not far. Of course, it was definitely impossible to go there during the day, but Jiang Hai was prepared to come back at night to take a look. As the ship slowly stopped, everyone also came to the floating platform. Jiang Hai glanced at the harvest of these girls, and he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. Because these girls really harvested a lot of small tuna. There were more than 100 of them, almost filling up the tank. When the ship stopped, Kevin and the others had already stood up. Although the other 3 girls weren't as good as Kevin in terms of the position on the sea, they also grew up in this small town after all. They were still very good at dealing with fish. After standing up, they each took out a knife from their bag. They directly killed the fish, then cut off the fish head, pulled out the internal organs and put them aside. After that, they directly cut the fish into 2 pieces. This was the bait used for fishing. Seeing their actions, Jiang Hai and the others also came down and began to help. It took almost another hour to finish more than 100 fish, and then they began to cut it. For example, if you are fishing for barracuda, this fish's mouth is not small, but it likes to bite, so when fishing for this kind of fish, the meat has to be more square. If you are fishing for loach, this fish's face is very flat, so you have to cut it thinner. If you are fishing for black tuna, another name for bluefin golden spear, this fish is very big, so you need to cut the fish into bigger pieces. I know there are a lot of black tuna around here, but whether you can catch them depends on the situation. As for these internal organs and minced meat, they are the key to attracting these fish. While cutting the fish pieces, Kevin introduced them to Jiang Hai. I really don't understand this very well, this is your problem as a guide. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled. He really didn't understand this, but he was a little lucky to have hired a reliable guide. Then listen to me. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kevin smiled and then began to throw the internal organs and minced fish pieces into the sea. Jiang Hai knew that she was luring the fish over. Some fish are purely carnivorous, some are omnivorous, but no matter what kind of fish it is, they all eat fish. Especially internal organs with blood, there is no animal that doesn't like to eat them, because these internal organs contain a lot of calories and fat, which is different from humans. Animals like these things very much. With these messy things thrown into the sea, it didn't take long for a large number of fish under the sea to be attracted. Of course, the fish that came over were just some small fish, the most numerous of which were small fish such as anchovies and herring. And these small fish are the main source of food for large fish. Seeing that the small fish began to pile up, these girls also picked up the fish pieces they liked and strung them on the fishing line they brought. Jiang Hai also set up the 6 rods and put the largest piece of fish on them, waiting to catch tuna. Tuna won't be hooked so quickly. Are you sure you don't want to catch some barracuda or something to play with first? Looking at Jiang Hai's movements, Kevin asked him with a smile, but Jiang Hai didn't want to change the bait. He came here to fish for tuna and there was no need to fish for anything else. But this idea was shaken after 5 minutes because the girls over there took the bait. Wow! With the exclamation of one of the girls, a long fish that looked like a knife was pulled out of the water by her. This fish is not small, about 80 centimeters long. Its head is a bit like a hairtail, and it has a mouth full of big sharp teeth, but its body is much thicker than a hairtail. Seeing this fish on the fishing line, Delina and Marion immediately wanted to help their new friend, but before they went forward, Kevin had already stopped them. At the same time, they picked up the knife and directly smashed the fish to death with the back of the knife. After the fish stopped moving, they went forward to remove the hook. This fish is called barracuda, commonly known as sea wolves. It's very fierce. When this fish is in a group, even sharks don't dare to provoke them. Look at their big teeth, if you're accidentally bitten, you'll bleed. It's very troublesome. Seeing that the fish has been taken down, Kevin explained to Delina and the others why he didn't let them come forward to help. Hearing Kevin's words, Delina and the others also nodded. If Kevin didn't say it, they really wouldn't have known. Jiang Hai next to them was also a little embarrassed. In fact, he didn't know either, but now is not the time to expose himself, so he's still prepared to fish for tuna very seriously. But an existence like tuna, which can almost be regarded as a top predator of the ocean, is really not so easy to appear. While Jiang Hai was waiting for tuna, Kevin and the others took the bait again, this time 3 barracuda in a row. Chapter 490. Barracuda, since they are called sea wolves, they do have some similarities with wolves. For example, they live in groups. Barracuda move in schools. If one is caught, it means that there is a school nearby. As the 3 fish were quickly pulled up, Kevin and the others continued to put down the fishing line. This time, Delina and the others also went to help. Watching them pull the fish up one by one, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curl his lips. Azalina, Belle, and Harriman, who were not interested in the fish, also ran to the floating platform at this time. Helping to catch the fish is nothing more than waiting for the fish to be pulled up, then directly knocking the fish to death. They are very good at doing this. TSK, they are really King lucky. My fish, quickly take the bait. Looking at the fish being pulled up, Jiang Hai's face was expressionless, but he still cared a little in his heart. It's really shameful for him to lose to these little girls. However, it was a pity that fishing was not up to him. It would be strange if he could fish it up just because he said so. Because the bait on his fishing rod was too big, the sea wolves couldn't swallow the bait in one bite. If they didn't swallow the bait, then they wouldn't be able to catch the fish. Therefore, Jiang Hai quickly threw out several pieces of bait. However, he didn't manage to catch any big fish. This made Jiang Hai lose face. They are only catching small fish, I want to catch a big one. Looking at the barracuda that are still being pulled up, Jiang Hai took a deep breath and comforted himself with this reason. But at this moment, Kevin suddenly exclaimed in the distance. Then, under her forceful tug, a broad back appeared on the surface of the sea. Oh my God, this fish is so big. Hearing Kevin's exclamation, Delina and the others also looked over. But after seeing it, they couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The size of the fish exposed at this time is about 1 meter, and the tail fin is not completely exposed, so they don't know the exact size, but at least they can be sure that this fish is definitely more than 1.5 meters long. A 1.5 meter long fish is already a big fish. Looking at the faint golden glow on the dorsal fin under the sunlight, Kevin and the rest's eyes lit up. Don't move, this is the yellowfin golden spear. It's too strong, we can't pull it up. Watching Delina, who was going to help him, Kevin threw away the string in his hand. After that, he took out a pair of thick working gloves from her bag and quickly put them on. After that, he took out a wooden stick and started to stir the string. One of her friends also put on a pair of gloves and began to fish. Anyone who had fished before would know that fishing in the sea was different from fishing in the river. This was because there were often some big and fierce fish in the sea. For example, tuna. This kind of fish was big and strong. If one used an ordinary fishing rod to catch it, it would be very difficult for people to grasp it. That was why there was the saying of fishing rods. Jiang Hai's 5 or 6 fishing rods were all fishing rods, but none of them have taken the bait yet. When such a big fish took the bait, what people had to do was to fight with the fish and consume most of the fish's strength underwater. Only then could the fish be brought up. However, although the tuna was not small, its endurance was not bad. But it wasn't a difficult fish to catch. First, it was because the fishing lines used by Kevin and the rest were quite thick, and there was no fishing rod. The tuna couldn't pull the boat away, nor did it have the strength to break the fishing rod. Second, this kind of fish can't jump. Jumping fish were more difficult to catch because when the fish jumped, the fishing line must be retracted instantly. Otherwise, the hook might fall off in the air. The most famous fish that can do this was the big sea silver carp, but this kind of fish didn't exist in the Atlantic Ocean. But even if it existed, Jiang Hai probably wouldn't fish it, because this kind of fish meat was soft and had a lot of bones. Fishing was a very good fish species, but it wasn't good for eating. The locals basically used it as salted fish when they caught it. On the other side, Kevin and her little friend had been fighting with this guy for about 20 minutes by the side of the boat. The struggle of the fish gradually slowed down. If they really went to Cape Cod like Edward Anderson said, it would be very troublesome to catch this kind of tuna. He also had to look at the fish's trajectory and pay attention when fishing. Generally speaking, when fishing for tuna, especially large tuna, there was a 60% chance that the fish would escape the hook, but it was precisely because of this that it was fun. When the fish was about 10 meters away from the boat, Kevin and the rest called Harriman to come over and help. After slowly pulling this guy to the side of the boat, Harriman was really powerful. With such a big body, its strength naturally wouldn't be small. It directly lifted the fish by its chin and dragged the huge yellowfin golden spear towards the ship's floating platform. After reaching the platform, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at it, his eyelids couldn't help but twitch. This tuna is about 1.8 meters long and weighs at least 130 kilograms. This is Harriman. Otherwise, if it was Bell, not to mention pulling the fish up, he would probably have to go down himself. Of course, Jiang Hai also has the strength to do so. It's not the biggest, but it's not small either. Hang it up and kill it. She quickly tied the fish's tail with a rope, and then put it on a crane above the plate armor of the boat. Kevin urged Belle to hang the fish up and told Harriman to kill it quickly. Harriman also took her knife and gestured there. As mentioned before, tuna breathed by crashing into a machine. Even if it was kept in a pool on the shore, it would die quickly. So what they had to do now was to drain its blood before it died. It was true that fish were cold-blooded animals, but it didn't mean that their blood was always cold. The so-called cold-blooded animals referred to the blood in their bodies, which would change according to the changes in the surrounding temperature. It didn't mean that their blood was cold. When they were fishing, the fish was constantly struggling. After exercise, people's blood would become hot, let alone fish. When the fish's blood was hot, if the fish died, the blood would enter the fish's meat and produce lactic acid, which would make the fish taste very bad, especially for tuna, which had to be eaten raw. Jiang Hai and the rest didn't know much about this, but fortunately, Kevin understood it very well. Under her command, Belle hung the fish up. Then Harriman killed the fish and drained its blood. After cleaning up the blood, Harmanley and Belle laughed. To be honest, they were just starting to feel the joy of having fun. In the first 8 days, it was basically Jiang Hai playing, and they just watched TV and enjoyed the scenery. Now that there was something they could do, they were still very happy. This fish is about 130 kilograms. According to our standards, if the meat is good, it can be sold for more than $1,000. Uncle, since this fish was caught on your boat, let's split it half and half. After thinking about it, Kevin looked at Jiang Hai and said excitedly. She went to sea with Jiang Hai and didn't care about the $50 guide fee. She was doing this for these fish. One must know that catching this fish is equivalent to her family's monthly income. No need, it's all yours. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also waved his hand. He didn't care about this small amount of money. What he cared about was that since Kevin and the others knew that he was the father of Delina and Marion, they no longer called him boss, but uncle. These guys really didn't learn anything good. Hearing Jiang Hai say that the money from selling the fish would be his, Kevin also narrowed her eyes and smiled. She immediately took Harriman and brought the fish into the ice room that Jiang Hai had prepared. There, Jiang Hai specially prepared a water silo for the fish that he caught. He put a lot of ice in it to keep the fish fresh and tender. Uncle, do you want me to give you a line? After working for a long time, Kevin also came out of the water silo. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little speechless, she couldn't help but tease Jiang Hai with a smile. In her opinion, Jiang Hai's fishing rods were useless. No need. Although they were having fun playing with each other, Jiang Hai also had self-respect. It was not so easy to make him surrender like this. But looking at the barracuda that filled the water tank and the yellowfin, Jiang Hai felt that if he continued to fish like this, it might be really difficult to get any fish. After thinking for a while, he took the fishing rod out of the water again, but this time, he didn't use the bait. Instead, he returned to the yacht's kitchen. When he reappeared, he had a piece of beef in his hand. Wow, beef, and it looks good. Uncle, you're not going to use this thing to fish, are you? Seeing Jiang Hai coming down with the fish, Kevin and the others couldn't help laughing and shouting. Of course, why not? Hearing their words, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows and said with a serious face. I'm not fishing for crocodiles. Tuna eat beef? Seeing that Jiang Hai was really going to fish with beef, the four girls here couldn't help laughing. They had never seen anyone use beef to fish for tuna. Let me show you. Hearing their laughter, Jiang Hai chuckled. Maybe fish don't eat beef, but that's ordinary beef. Is his beef an ordinary guy? This is his trump card. Jiang Hai cut off a piece of beef that weighed about 3 ounces. He hung it on the boat's pole and then threw it into the sea. This was his killer move. P.S. Below is the advertisement time. Because they are afraid that you can't see it, they posted it in the chapter. Of course, these words are free. I recommend XX God's competitive work, Super Trainer, the most awesome XXXXX competitive football novel. Friends who like to read this kind of novel must not miss it. Chapter 491. Hey, is your dear dad crazy? He actually wants to use beef to fish? Looking at Jiang Hai who had set the bait again, Kevin couldn't help but say to Daliana and Marian in surprise. Her words could be considered as a pun, because Dalina and Marian really liked Jiang Hai. Using the term dear was indeed a bit, too ambiguous. As for whether she meant it or not, who knew? Hearing her words, Daliana and Marian's little faces couldn't help but blush, but they quickly recovered. You don't understand, just wait and see. Looking at Kevin, Daliana shook her head and said with great interest. It seems that you really don't understand fishing. The bait for fishing should be suitable, not how much it is worth. Hearing that the two sisters seemed to be very confident in Jiang Hai, this made Kevin a little speechless. Indeed, fishing should be about whether the bait was right or not how expensive the bait was. This was very clear to all experienced fishermen. For example, in China, there were many veteran cadres who liked to fish. And these people had already summed up a principle. They were very clear about what kind of fish liked to eat. As the old saying went, sing a song when you go to a mountain, and put the bait when you catch a fish. Grassroots, that is, grass carp like to eat various kinds of corn, vegetables, grass leaves, and other bait mixed together. Crucian carp like to eat red worms, steamed buns, and some insects. Carp like to eat snails, shrimps, earthworms, silkworms, pig hydrazine, raw meat, and so on. Black carp also like to eat insects, snails, small fish, shrimps, and so on. Tilapia, snakehead, fathead, catfish, all kinds of fish naturally like to eat all kinds of things. The same was true for sea fish, and beef, was indeed not one of the usual things for fishing. Of course, it didn't mean that beef couldn't be caught. Beef could only be caught for those fish that weren't too picky. Those fish that were greedy, such as barracuda, still liked to eat beef very much. As for tuna, some of them weren't too picky, but Jiang Hai's target was bluefin or yellowfin, which were still very picky. Just wait and see. Our beef is not ordinary. Although they didn't know whether Jiang Hai's mystery had anything to do with this beef, Daliana and Marian trusted Jiang Hai from the bottom of their hearts. Moreover, they also knew that Jiang Hai's beef wasn't ordinary. If it was ordinary, would it be so expensive? One must know that the manor's main source of income came from the beef, not from selling fish. Alright, looks like you guys won't give up until all hope is gone. Let's wait and see. Seeing that the two little girls were so supportive of Jiang Hai, Kevin shrugged helplessly, indicating that he was waiting for a miracle to happen. However, just as her voice fell, before she could take a breath, Jiang Hai's fishing line had already snapped. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be happy. He knew that he got hooked. Then, he straightened the fishing rod in an instant, and then quickly turned the rollers. Jiang Hai and these girls had one thing in common, that is, he also liked violence. Moreover, ordinary fish really couldn't withstand his violence. He felt that the pulling force of this fish under the water at this time might be the strongest among all the fish he had ever caught. It was even stronger than the first time his big fool was hooked. But he was no longer the same person as before. In the past, he only had the strength of a human, but he could easily deal with this fish. Not to mention now, Jiang Hai directly picked up the fishing rod, then began to turn the rollers quickly. If the other fishermen saw him like this, their jaws would probably drop off in shock. What kind of joke is this? Usually, when people fight with fish, the person will drag the fish out of the water until it's tired. Jiang Hai is now directly forcing the fish out of the water. Is there a mistake? Is this a joke? When did the battle between a person and a fish become a competition of strength? And most importantly, when did a person on the shore have the strength of a fish? Seeing Jiang Hai pulling the fish back, Kevin and the others looked at each other. The other three girls curled their lips, because they thought that if the fish can be pulled back like this, it proves that the fish is not big. But Kevin faintly felt that something was wrong, because the fish stirred up a lot of waves in the distance. Just as she was a little curious, a long dorsal fin that was bigger than the one she had just caught emerged from the water. It shone with a strange golden light under the sunlight. Seeing this, her mouth couldn't help but turn into an O shape in surprise. Oh my god, it's also a yellowfin, and it looks like it's bigger than Kevin's. Seeing this scene, the three girls next to her were also stunned. What's going on? Is there anyone who can catch this kind of fish with pure strength? Simple and crude, without a trace of skill to speak of, but it still caught the fish. Looking at the straight line that was almost as thick as a chopstick, they couldn't help but sigh for the fish. This fellow was really unlucky to have provoked a humanoid magical beast. This yellowfin tuna is clearly not a good fish, and the most important thing is that it is still very strong. Jiang Hai did not slip away from it, nor did he fight it, but directly pulled it over. A tuna that can grow so big is destined to be not young, and it is very likely that it has been caught by others before. Seeing that it was not Jiang Hai's opponent and was getting closer and closer to the floating platform, the fish did not panic and run around. Instead, it accelerated and rushed to the bottom of the boat. This is also a trick of the tuna, rushing to the hull. If the fishing line is scratched by the bottom of the boat, it can be easily broken. Would Jiang Hai give it such a chance to escape? But would Jiang Hai give it such a chance? Looking at the yellowfin tuna drilling to the bottom of the boat, Jiang Hai shouted, "Get up!" At the moment when the tuna rushed over, Jiang Hai used his arms and directly swung the fishing rod. The tuna on this side did not think that it would be forcibly thrown out of the sea by others. With a bang, the fish has emerged from the sea, and then it was heavily thrown on the floating platform by Jiang Hai. However, although the fall was not light, the fish was still very tenaciously moving, hoping to return to the sea. But how can Jiang Hai give it such a chance? He went up and hit the guy's head directly with the rod, temporarily stunning the fish. Then he took the rope thrown over and put it on the fish's tail. He gestured to Belle, and Belle, who was still on the other side of the crane, immediately started the crane and pulled the tuna up. This time, Harriman, who was already experienced, stepped forward to bleed the fish. "Oh my god, uncle, your fish is 2 meters long and at least 180 kilograms. How did you do it? Are you a human or a monster?" Looking at Belle and Harriman, who were dealing with the fish, Kevin walked over with a confused face and looked at Jiang Hai in disbelief. She had never seen anyone like Jiang Hai in her life. She was very sure that the meat of this fish must be about the same. If her fish could be sold for $1,000, Jiang Hai's fish could be sold for at least $1,000. She was a little happy just now, but now it seemed that this uncle really didn't lack her money. Of course, call me Uncle Monster in the future. Jiang Hai didn't care about being called uncle. He rubbed Kevin's head, who was already in a daze. Jiang Hai laughed, turned around, and was about to put the beef on the fishing rod again. But at this time, another fishing rod, which had already put the beef on it, began to turn around crazily again. There was no time to serve the beef. Jiang Hai went directly to the front of the fishing rod. Once again, he used the same trick. He lifted the fishing rod in an instant, straightened the line and began to reel in the line. These girls had already seen Jiang Hai's monstrous strength once, so they weren't surprised. But they all knew that Jiang Hai didn't catch a small fish, but an out-and-out big one. Looking at the fishing line that seemed like it would break at any time, they couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. When did fishing in the sea become so easy? For a 1.5-meter yellowfin, they wasted half an hour to get the fish. They also had to rely on Belle and Harriman to clean it up. Jiang Hai, on the other hand, only took a few minutes from the time the fish was hooked to the time he caught it. It was really infuriating to compare oneself to others. As the fishing line got shorter and shorter, the dorsal fin of the big fish also appeared on the surface of the water. This time, when the sun shone, Kevin and the girls couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Because at this time, under the sunlight, the back of the fish was clearly dark blue. Black tuna, it's really a black tuna. Looking at the big fish in front of them, Kevin couldn't help but jump up and shout. Although today she was clamoring to bring Jiang Hai and the others to fish for the bluefin golden spear, to be honest, she didn't have much confidence in her heart. Ever since the bluefin golden spear became a supreme delicacy in the eyes of the Japanese, the number of people who caught the bluefin golden spear all over the world suddenly increased by several times, or even dozens of times. Just like the words on Capital said, with so much profit, it would be strange if they didn't go crazy. But decades ago, to be exact, before the Japanese had become rich, World War I, World War II, and even after World War II, even in the 60s and 70s, this game was quite worthless. Some big fish farms would even mince this kind of fish and feed it to the chickens. In the past 30 years, the originally worthless bluefin golden spear had gradually reached the end of its road, and it had become a kind of economic protection fish species. This made some old fishermen couldn't help but feel that things were really unpredictable. P.S. During the advertisement time, I recommend the sports basketball novel, Basketball God, by Minced Meat and Big Eggplant. It is currently the top basketball novel on the website. It is the most awesome 6666666666666 sports basketball novel. If there are friends who like sports basketball, don't miss it. Chapter 492. He pulled the huge bluefin tuna out of the water with ease, and then did the same thing as before. He knocked it out with a stick, hooked its tail, drained its blood, and chilled it. Everything was so orderly. The only difference was that this fish was even bigger than the yellowfin that Jiang Hai caught just now. It was still 2 meters long and a little taller than Jiang Hai, but it weighed 200 kilograms. It was an out-and-out big fish. According to Kevin, the fish could be sold for at least $30,000. If it was sent directly to Japan, it would probably be sold for more than $50,000, but here, $30,000 was the highest price. Jiang Hai wouldn't go to Japan to sell fish for $20,000. The loss outweighed the gain. However, it turns out that bluefin are really rare. After Jiang Hai caught a huge bluefin tuna, he really didn't catch another bluefin tuna. He didn't even see a bluefin tuna that was more than a meter long. Although his beef was still very popular, his third fish was another yellowfin, and it was not small. The fourth fish was a shark, a bull shark. Unfortunately, this fish was a protected species in the Caribbean, and it was not allowed to be eaten even if it was caught. Therefore, Jiang Hai thought that saving a fish's life was better than building a 7-floor pagoda, so he let it go. The fifth fish he caught was an Atlantic sailfish, which was more than 2 meters long. It was not easy to see such a fish here. Jiang Hai still remembered that he once caught such a fish and sold it alive for $100,000. Unfortunately, there were fishing boats at that time, but Jiang Hai only had a yacht now, so he couldn't raise this fish. He could only kill it and drain its blood like a tuna, then chilled it. Anyway, it was a victory. After catching the fifth fish, Jiang Hai didn't want to use the hook again, because the warehouse he prepared was already full. After that, they had lunch at sea. It was a Caribbean-style lunch. Since it was Kevin and the others who were cooking, according to them, they could take them out to play. Most importantly, Jiang Hai said that the fish they caught belonged to them. This made them very excited, so they took the initiative to kill a few barracuda and made a Caribbean-style lunch. In fact, it was the same, just a simple meal. However, it was Jiang Hai's first time eating barracuda fish. He had to admit that the barracuda meat tasted pretty good. The meat of this kind of fish was similar to the garlic clove meat that was often mentioned in China, but it was shaped like strips. It tasted good, and the most important thing was that it was fresh and tender. After lunch, Jiang Hai and the others basked in the sun for a while. After chatting with each other for a while, they prepared to return. From here to the dock where Jiang Hai had set off, it took about 3 hours to drive slowly. Indeed, it was still early, but don't forget that they had to sell fish first, and the place to sell fish was on another dock. Under the guidance of Kevin, Jiang Hai drove the boat to the dock on the other side. After driving for about 2 hours, they saw the coastal dock. Compared to the dock in the town where Jiang Hai had stopped, this one was much bigger. Not only were there many high-rise buildings, but the greenery was also done well. On the dock, there were not only many large fishing boats, but also some small yachts, but compared to Jiang Hai's yacht, those were far worse. This is Aguadia, the biggest city in our area. It's also a good place for tourism. Looking at the huge dock in front of them, Kevin introduced it to Jiang Hai and the others. Hearing the envy in her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. She is still young now. Sometimes, the more prosperous the place, the better, at least Jiang Hai thinks so. As Jiang Hai's boat sailed into the port, many fishermen on the fishing boats here looked at them curiously. But compared to the surprise in the town where Jiang Hai had stopped, the people here were much more indifferent. Although Puerto Rico's economy was not good, although there was a shortage of fresh water, and although the people here were not very rich. However, it was the best choice for those who liked to travel but didn't have much money, and those who liked to emigrate but didn't have much money either. In many big cities in Puerto Rico, it was the place where millionaires with a net worth of around $1 million lived. $1 million was indeed a lot of money in the United States, but it was not a privilege at all. At most, you could be considered a white-collar worker with a better life, but $1 million was completely different in Puerto Rico. They used their American citizenship to buy houses and land here, and the local government did not dare to trouble them. With $1 million, they were rich in the local area. The quality of their spending here was very good, only $20 or $30 per visit, and not more than $100 per night. Of course, this was the information that Belle had found out last night, but Jiang Hai did not care. Because of the low price, the good familiarity, and the feeling of being superior, many Americans were willing to come here to play. Aguadia was also a tourist destination, so naturally, there were many foreigners here. After Jiang Hai and the others sailed into the dock, they did not stop there directly. Instead, they drove directly to the fishing company. This was the first time Jiang Hai had gone to the fishing company, but the way the people here looked at him made Jiang Hai feel a little strange. Generally speaking, when a boat sailed into a fishing company, it must have gotten fish, which meant that they were competing with the fishermen here for business. However, the people here did not seem to care. In fact, it was understandable. There were plenty of fish in the sea, and Jiang Hai was driving a yacht. How many fish could he catch? However, when they saw the fish on Jiang Hai's boat, many of them would probably regret it. It was Jiang Hai's first time here, but Kevin was a local. He directly took Jiang Hai to a fishing company in Spanish. Jiang Hai did not know what the name was, but Kevin said that this was the fishing company with the highest price among all the nearby fishing companies. In the Caribbean, fishing companies were the only thing that was not lacking. After all, the people here relied on fishing to make a living. When Jiang Hai's boat docked next to the fishing company, some of the nearby boats stopped what they were doing and looked at Jiang Hai with a mocking expression. They thought that Jiang Hai had stopped by the wrong boat. It was a very happy thing to be able to see the rich suffer. However, when the fishing company's hook pulled out a large yellowfin golden spear from Jiang Hai's cabin, these people could not remain calm. There were sounds of gasps and discussions everywhere. Looking at their expressions, Jiang Hai smiled. He liked to see these people's surprised expressions. It was very interesting. Wow, the fish is not bad. It's A grade. I'll give you $6 per kilogram. What do you think? Looking at the scale in front of him, the person in charge of counting asked Jiang Hai. Before Jiang Hai came here, he had inquired about the A-grade yellowfin golden gun. In the United States, a pound of yellowfin golden gun was about $4. 1 kilogram was definitely more than 2 pounds, which was $8. But here, it was only worth $6. He glanced at Kevin. This fish was hers. Hearing this person's words, Kevin also calculated in her heart. Her fish was 130 kilograms in total. $6 per pound, that was $780. Although it was a little less than the $1,000 in her heart, it was still okay, so she nodded. Then it's settled. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the person here weighed again. It was 138 kilograms in total. Just as the person here was about to count, a white and fat old man came out and said to Jiang Hai with a smile, "Let's say it's 140 kilograms. I saw that you have fish in your boat. Young man, I'll sell you a favor." Listening to the old man's words, Jiang Hai and the others were stunned for a moment, but it didn't matter. After all, they made more money. "Hello, are you Americans?" When Kevin went to the side to count the money, the old man also came over and asked Jiang Hai with a smile. Jiang Hai and the others also nodded. Listening to the old man's accent, he should also be an American. Oh, there are a lot of Americans here now. That's right, after all, it's tuna season. Huh, let me see what other good things you got. The old man heard Jiang Hai's words and said with a smile. At this time, Kevin had come back with an envelope. Needless to say, there must be cash in the envelope. Now that Puerto Rico is bankrupt, the banks here are useless. Except for Citibank's branch here, all the other banks have closed down. After all, Puerto Ricans who are not Americans don't trust Citibank very much. Compared to banks, they trust the cash in their hands more. What's more, taking the money directly can avoid taxes. Did you get the money? Seeing Kevin and the others happy, Jiang Hai also asked them. N. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kevin smiled and stuffed the money in the front of her jeans, putting it carefully. It can be seen that this girl is quite concerned about this money. Then, old man, come and see my other fish. Seeing Kevin stay by the side, Jiang Hai also smiled and gestured to Belle on the boat to continue selling fish. The next day, Jiang Hai caught a tuna. Seeing Jiang Hai's bigger yellowfin, the fishermen's voices became louder, but the old man's eyes were shining with a golden light. Sure enough, Jiang Hai's fish is bigger, 189 kilograms, 190 kilograms, still $6 per kilogram. More than $1,000 is not a small amount, but when the third one came out, these people were even more confused. When the fourth Atlantic sailfish came out, some people looked at Jiang Hai with envy. On the fifth day, when Jiang Hai's bluefin came out, the whole fishing company was quiet. Everyone was looking at Jiang Hai and the others with eager eyes. P.S. During the commercial break, I recommend friends to act cute. Invincible Little and Little Bao's similar farming novels, Golden Ranch. I don't need to recommend Fatty's Golden Fishery, it's much more popular than mine. Chapter 493. Hey, lucky boy, if I were you, I would return to the United States immediately after accepting the money. Looking at the accounts reported to Jiang Hai after the fish were weighed, the old man couldn't help but whisper to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked around. As a result, he found that at this time around the fishing company, the fishermen who were originally gathered there were whispering in twos and threes. However, when they saw Jiang Hai's gaze, these people would turn their heads away. Although Jiang Hai didn't study psychology, he heard that when someone actively avoids your gaze, if this person doesn't like you, then this person has a guilty conscience. These fishermen naturally can't like Jiang Hai, so they have a guilty conscience. Why would someone who has never met feel guilty? That is, he is preparing to do something that he is guilty of. What? Is Puerto Rico also so lawless? Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai chuckled, then looked at his harvest today. Jiang Hai's fish today, the 2 yellowfin tunas, were not very valuable. The 2 fish were sold for less than $3,000. However, the Atlantic sailfish was sold for a good price, a total of $13,000. This is the difference between a live fish and a dead fish. A live fish can be sold for $100,000, but a dead fish is only worth a little more than $10,000. The most expensive one was the bluefin tuna, which Jiang Hai sold for a total of $27,000. In total, Jiang Hai's fish were sold for a total of $42,890. This money is already comparable to the annual income of a middle-class family in the United States. At the same time, this money is enough for the poor Puerto Ricans to target Jiang Hai. Lawless? You can also think of it this way. This is a very dangerous place to begin with. Although it's not like some countries in South America where the warlords are divided, the government can no longer control the whole country. If something really happens to you, as long as someone pushes the blame to the Americans, what was originally a civil case may be upgraded to a political case. You know, politics is a pool of dark water, and it's not that easy to clear it up. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the owner of the fishing company here said with a smile. Jiang Hai actually understood what he meant. Although Puerto Rico wasn't exactly lawless, it wasn't that far off. The whole country was divided into 3 parts. The first part was the pro-government party, which accounted for the largest proportion. These people were also the people who wanted to be integrated into the United States the most, so these people were envious of Jiang Hai, but would not do anything to him. The other group of people were those who didn't care. These people weren't short of money. They didn't think that not being annexed to the United States would have a big impact on their lives. Therefore, these people were basically the kind of people who abstained from voting during the election. The third part was the people who did not want to be integrated into the United States. Some of these people were nationalists, and some were people who held power in their hands. Now, it could be said that they held the power of life and death here. However, once they were integrated into the United States, everything would be done according to the rules of the United States. There would be elections and democracy, and then the power in their hands would disappear. Therefore, these people were the people who were most unwilling to be integrated into the United States. These people wanted to find people who would support them, and those desperados and extreme nationalists were their best choice. These people were basically in jobs that were not very good, and they did not earn much money. For money, they would do anything. Fortunately, such people were only 5% of the people in the country. However, there were also 1.8 million people in Puerto Rico, and 5% of the 1.8 million people were only 90,000 people. If they were spread out across the country, naturally, it was not a lot. However, it was hard to say if 90,000 people were to deal with Jiang Hai. If something really happened to Jiang Hai here, the Puerto Rican government only needed to say that these people were against being integrated into the United States, and the United States would basically let it go, because it was impossible for them to send troops to attack Puerto Rico. At most, they would push Puerto Rico further away and prevent them from joining the United States. The Puerto Ricans had even tried to assassinate the President of the United States. In the end, other than killing a group of people, nothing else was done. That was why it was said that politics was the dirtiest thing in the world. Some people would say that if these people were against being integrated into the United States, then with the old man's identity, wouldn't he be afraid that his fishing company would be smashed? Afraid? Of course, he would be afraid. However, it was impossible for such a big fishing company to not have someone behind it. Those in power knew that if they touched these companies, the United States government would not be affected. However, it was hard to say if those mercenaries or assassins would come knocking on their door. Some money could be used, but some couldn't. If they used the wrong money, they might not be able to spend it. They weren't in the Terra Syndicate's headquarters. If I were you, I would first replenish the fresh water here, then leave and return to the United States immediately. I can guarantee your safety here, but if you go outside, I don't know. Seeing that Jiang Hai seemed to have noticed the movements of the fishermen outside, the old man did not say much. He just whispered to Jiang Hai. However, would Jiang Hai be afraid? Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai smiled softly. Thank you, uncle, but if they have the guts to come, then let them come. Looking at the fishermen outside, Jiang Hai chuckled, then took the bag of money, walked out of the sea company, and then took everyone back to the boat. After arriving on the boat, Jiang Hai also started the engine and headed to the port where he stopped last night. About an hour or so, Jiang Hai's boat also stopped at the port. The port guard captain was naturally very welcoming. After asking him to refill the boat and refuel it, Jiang Hai got off the boat with Belle Lester. As for Kevin and the others, they had already gone back. Today, they also sold the barracuda they caught. Including the yellowfin, they got a total of more than $1,000. After each of them got more than $300, they happily went home. After all, for them, they were just here to be tour guides, and other things had nothing to do with them. However, if Jiang Hai and the others were still here tomorrow, then they were willing to continue to be tour guides for Jiang Hai and the others. Tomorrow, they could go catch lobsters to eat. Jiang Hai also smiled at this. After giving each of them $100, he made an appointment to go with them tomorrow. He really didn't care about these locals. After all, their boat was not easy to deal with. If they dared to be tough, then Jiang Hai wouldn't mind letting them know how tough they were. After sending Kevin and the others off, Jiang Hai took Belle off the boat. They still had to buy other things. There was no need to buy food because there were still some leftovers from the barracuda and other fish that they had caught today after selling them off. According to Kevin and the others, Delina and Marion caught the barracuda, and it had nothing to do with them. So they all stayed on the boat. At least, they didn't have to worry about food, and there was a lot of beef on the boat. Most importantly, the food here wasn't very delicious, at least Jiang Hai didn't like it very much. They got off the boat mainly to buy alcohol. Today, they ate and drank on the boat, and they drank a lot of beer, so they just wanted to go to the bar to buy some. But when they walked into the bar, they found that the atmosphere was a little strange. When Jiang Hai and Belle entered the bar yesterday, these people glanced at Jiang Hai and the others, then they didn't care about Jiang Hai and the others. But today, many people kept staring at Jiang Hai, and their eyes were red, which made people feel very depressed. Boss, the situation doesn't seem right. Jiang Hai felt the unfriendly eyes of these people, and Belle, who retired from the Delta, naturally felt it too. He leaned close to Jiang Hai and whispered. You have a weapon with you, right? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled and whispered in a low voice. Of course. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Belle replied affirmatively. In such an unknown area, he must have a weapon with him. I have one too, it will be fine. Seeing that Belle also had a weapon with him, Jiang Hai smiled, then said casually. Then, they walked to the bar counter and gently knocked on the table to call over the bartender from yesterday. 2 glasses of the wine you made yesterday, 5 boxes of beer, and a box of rum. Looking at the bartender, Jiang Hai took out a stack of Franklins from his pocket, which was one of his gains today. However, when he took out the money, he felt that the breathing of many people in the bar had quickened. Feeling this scene, Jiang Hai smiled. He just likes the feeling of walking on a tightrope. He took out a few bills and threw them on the bartender's table. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the bartender quickly put away the money and started to adjust the drinks. "If we are you, I will leave after this drink, and I will send the wine to your boat." After adjusting the drinks and serving a glass to Jiang Hai and Belle, the bartender whispered to Jiang Hai. "Why?" Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also raised his eyebrows and asked. "Your business in the fishing company has been spread here, understand?" Hearing Jiang Hai ask why, the bartender couldn't help but frown. Did this guy take too much medicine? It's so obvious, is there a need to ask why? "Thank you, this is your tip, remember to send the wine to my boat." Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai was still surprised, but the bartender was also kind. After taking out another Franklin's and handing it to the bartender, Jiang Hai slowly tasted the wine. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't care, the bartender didn't say anything. He had already reminded him, so it's not his fault if he didn't listen. Therefore, the bartender started mixing the drinks again and pretended not to know anything. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.